that'll become apparent when
I got these. Already.
We're becoming frozen this time.
Yep.
Then if you want to pull up your phone, go on to our meeting.
I don't know that we can. I've seen you out. Oh, right. Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, you're.
Fun never ends.
Yeah. That's the
I'm gonna make that one roll back.
I'm gonna take my list. So I. Oh,
Good morning.
Oh, I didn't realize it's on here. Like my email, like my.
Yeah.
I do. What am I doing right now? Am I correct with them that I can just do it? Yeah, you can just do it. See, this is where I'm.
Hey, Jason, just want to introduce ourselves.
This is why I didn't- I don't need to do this.
Great.
Right now, so I
You know,
can get it.
Yeah, we'll hand out real quick.
Sounds good.
All right,
Oh, I don't have to register.
You guys have testimony.
I do, but I'm trying to like, to get myself registered.
Sure, yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. If it's giving you, so to do the electronically, you have to be connected to your Wi-Fi, otherwise you can just use that as a, no, there's little kiosks out here that you can register on.
I'm like 85 on the inside. I'm like, paper? I could write it on paper.
And good thing we got these phones here.
So in the assembly.
Actually, really kind of convenient. I got, once there's no meetings still
It's a
happening.
picture.
Blowing up. Probably not shit all
Last time I just saw one.
Right. Which
I didn't even have to work.
is cool, but that's where it all comes.
Can you send somebody
Typo.
with, there's a sign,
The
office,
something.
that says,
Very nice.
meeting screen to the
I think
sign.
you should see what those, just to make sure.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
one side, so that's sign.
Just put my final.
Yeah. No, the like sort of receive area there. Yeah. All right, thanks. It should be on on the. Part of that is, yeah. All right, thanks. Yeah, I don't know what to call that. The office for the operation.
I mean, first of all, it's a new operation on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Operators room, war room.
So,
The stuff that you recommend.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab a copy of it.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we have to send a test for before that.
Is it showing up for you on the QR code? Because bills aren't showing up for me.
Yeah, it's trying to, do you want to scan mine?
I don't.
You'll try that for one once and see if that works.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
It like won't give me the option of like even.
Oh, it doesn't work for on the phone either.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we just realized that something is wrong.
This is literally my worst fear, my worst fear.
Hey, this is Alex from Sergeant's office. Is Aaron available?
Man.
All right, so this is for 5.
Hey, we're in the university.
605.
Right now.
And then these
On the
are for
electronic
728.
registration, none of the bills are showing up.
And then this is just
It's
one
like
for
clickable, it's
42.
open, but there's no bills.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I don't know.
Kristen.
I am Sabrina.
That's why.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, I mean, now that I do this.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want me to stay on the line or? Hey Trevor, can you run down and grab a key for the tablets? They're all locked up, so, yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah.
I will get all these and then come in. It couldn't let me do another one for you, do I have to like go back?
Okay, now it is working.
He just said it was working.
Alex, is the kiosk working?
You just got your two early right?
Okay, it's working.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Sounds good, thank you. Bye. It is working now.
Thank you, and I can see that on my phone.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Morning.
All the tablets are locked, so we have to restart them.
Do you think
But
it
it's for something very specific.
Where's Jeff?
He had a meeting, so he's gonna join a little bit later. Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. I brought a cookie for him. Sugar. Before you go down. I know they got them in Hannah. Got extra Yeah. I'm doing it, I'm doing it. Are you doing it on me? I'm doing it for, interim president.
Oh, I see.
Good, how are you?
Right.
Morning. How are you doing? Every day that you're showing up for my.
I'm seeing these anymore. It's-
I know, I always, they're always professionally the ace projects. when I do it.
Yeah, no, I get it, totally. agree. We had
We did.
Memorial progress.
We had a lot of these reporting
Discuss.
but we're supposed to get rain today, so I
Oh,
think it's all.
no.
He's out of line.
20?
Coming up north, our house, they got 6 to 8. My house, my house, they got 6 to 8.
Wow.
We're not gonna score. It's a little bit physical.
I'm happy with that one, but I get lost.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm on the drive.
And one kid had the bunny This.
How are you?
Good, so.
Push it. So it doesn't go top.
This is Gus. Yeah, Audra, this weekend, she played Andy's daughter, and Andy's daughter. Five fifth graders in county. And I went head to head, and they did okay, Audra did well. But there's one kid, there's a student who will play, Audra does one of these. Shoves her out of bounds, and Sarah just lost her mind. I'm like, oh, it's a good pop.
There's a guy that doesn't return my calls.
Here's
a guy to do that was coming. Hey, happy belated birthday. Happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
I have a picture on my desk at home that I was gonna post on your Facebook thing of you and I sitting.
Yeah.
And they put, what's the name of the mittens? Bernie Sanders.
Oh,
They got him sitting behind us with the mittens. Somebody put it on my desk.
Thank you.
Oh.
Because both of us are like,
yeah,
yeah,
it was probably one of them exciting committee hearings.
yeah.
Hi, Senator Roth, how are you doing?
Hey, good to see you, Representative.
It is, I gotta get to my hearing now, so see you guys
Did
later.
your application figured out?
Huh?
Did you get your application figured
Yeah,
out?
I did. It was D, right? I put it in for D.
We'll figure it out.
All right. That isn't why I called you though. I
Okay,
just left that as a decoy to call you back.
there you go.
There's another reason I called you.
I'll call you after you.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, sorry.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Universities and Tech College Committee to order. We are not broadcast live. We are not being broadcast live in Wisconsin today, but we are recording this to be put up on YouTube later, just so that everyone is aware. It's good to have everyone here. Senators will be coming and joining us here as we go along. Today's informational hearing will cover two topics: an update on student enrollment data and a presentation on performance-based funding in higher education. First, we'll have an update on the enrollment data. We will. Representatives from the technical college system were unable to attend today, but we do have Legislative Fiscal Bureau to walk us through the latest enrollment numbers. And before I call, I'm going to have the clerk call the roll.
Senator Roth,
Here.
Senator Nas.
Here.
Senator Stachel,
Here.
Senator Fine, Senator Darling, Senator Larson, Senator Urbanbach, Senator Royce,
Here.
Senator Pat.
Here.
And I know that there are other committees meeting today, so senators will be coming and going. I'm going to have the clerk keep the roll open for the senators who join us a little bit later. So with that, I will at this time invite Krista Pugh to come forward from Legislative Fiscal Bureau. She has put out a memo here that has been distributed to the members. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, I will be presenting on the memo dated December 14th on technical college system enrollment in 2020-21 compared to 2010-11 in district peak enrollment. So looking at attachment 1, this attachment presents for each district enrollment in the year in which enrollment peaked statewide or system-wide, which was 2010-11. Enrollment in the year in which enrollment peaked in each individual district, and enrollment in 2020-21. 2021 is the most recent year for which data is available for enrollment. The final two columns present 2021 enrollment as a percentage of system peak and institutional peak. So for example, if you look at Blackhawk Technical College, the first on the table, their enrollment was 2,909 in 2010-11. Their district-wide peak was 2,927. In 2021, their enrollment had dropped to 1,736. That number is 59.7% of the system-wide peak, which was in 2010-11, as I mentioned, and 59.3% of their institutional peak. Looking next at attachment 2. This attachment shows for each technical college district enrollment in each year from 2009-10 through 2021. So you can see the trends over the past little over a decade. For each, we look back at enrollment back to 1976. For each district, their peak was either in 2009-10 or 2010-11. So for each district, it was one of those 2 years. The enrollment really peaked statewide around that time. As I mentioned previously, 10-11 was the peak system-wide, but you can see it in the totals along the bottom. 2009-10 was quite high as well. Attachment 3 shows statewide enrollment compared to the annual statewide unemployment rate. For the technical college system, enrollment tends to vary with the state of the economy. So when the economy is stronger, enrollment tends to be lower. And then when the economy is less strong, individuals maybe can't find full-time employment and go back for more training. So you can see, looking at the list, in years in which the unemployment rate is higher, FTE enrollment also tends to be higher in those years. So you can kind of see, I had mentioned previously, 2009, 10, and 10, 11 were the years in which enrollment was highest statewide. Those were years of very high unemployment. Similarly, if you look at years, looking more at more recent years, the unemployment rate has gone down significantly, and FTE enrollment has been similarly lower. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for this information. So if I can paraphrase what you're saying is, with the Wisconsin technical system here, their enrollment is very much correlated, it seems, to what the economy is doing. When the economy is not doing well, looks like people are utilizing the schooling for retraining, a career change, and so forth. When I look at 2021, that was a little COVID, of course, and everything that was happening there. We do have a high unemployment rate. I kind of find it interesting that there wasn't any correlation to an increase at the tech colleges. Do you have any thoughts or insights into that?
Yeah, it certainly is interesting. I think the pandemic is such a unique situation that it's a little bit difficult to say. We may need some more years to go by before we can really understand everything that all the trends that are happening. It would seem to me that the same, in this case, it's different from a year where typically the economy is down a little bit. And that in this case, the same forces that would be keeping people out of the workforce would maybe also be keeping them away from college, if it's childcare or health concerns, that would also keep them home. But it'll be certainly interesting to see. I think the unemployment rate has gone down since this is the 2020 annual rate. But it'll be interesting to look back in a couple of years and see what we can glean from the trends.
Absolutely. I apologize, Krista. These committee rooms, they set up with doors right behind.
Oh, yeah.
So
No problem.
sometimes it gets chaotic here.
No problem.
No, you're fine. I want to go to the committee here with questions. And I'm just going to call through the committee roll. And if senators can just chime in, particularly, and if you haven't been here on the roll, chime in whether or not you have a question, we can add you to the roll there too. Senator Larson.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you coming and putting forward the information for us. I guess and obviously I have UW Milwaukee in my district and watching what's happening with the other colleges too. And this is helpful to have that broad look at the entire system and to see that dive, and obviously the pandemic, fear of dying kind of gets people to do different things. I'm curious if there's national or even international trends that you have looked at to see if this is corresponding and this is in line with what's happening in other parts of the country and other parts of the globe.
Yeah, I have not looked at that. That certainly would be interesting. I can look and see what is available on that, but yeah, that's a great question.
Senator Nunn. Senator Erpenbach. Senator Stachel.
I guess just a technical question, if I may. When we're looking at the unemployment rate and the enrollment rates, I guess, do those students apply for enrollment that same year as the unemployment rate is reflected? Or so my question is, if we didn't see a correlation in 2021, would there might be a spike in enrollment in 21, 22 because of the unemployment rate in 20? Is it a year lag? Or is it always?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know how long the application process is. Would they apply in 2019 for a 2020 school year? Then is that how that would work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the application process varies depending on what program. Students at the technical colleges aren't always enrolled in a semester or year-long program. Sometimes it's a shorter term. But I think that's a great point. If you look at, for example, 2009, 10, and 2010, 11. 2009, 10 is the year in which unemployment peaked, but the following year is the year in which enrollment peaked. So it certainly is maybe an individual would look for work for a short time and then decide to proceed training.
Perfect. Thank you.
Senator Royce.
No, thank you.
Senator Fine.
No.
Senator Path.
Not at this time, thank you.
Senator Darling.
Not at this time, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Krista, for walking us through that. And just for the committee, next up, we're going to hear from the UW, but we're just trying to give the committee an understanding here of current enrollment trends here, institutions of higher learning. I'd ask the members who are on the telephone, if you could mute or if we could have them muted just to make sure that we don't hear that feedback here. Next up, the committee is going to hear from Ben Passmore, Associate Vice President for Policy Analysis and Research at the University of Wisconsin System. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Thanks to the senators for allowing me the opportunity to come before you today. I do have a set of slides. I was hoping there we go. I know that, thank you very much. I know that you have seen the LFB memo on our enrollment. I apologize if some of the things that I'm going to cover are slightly duplicative of what they've already done. They always do a fine job, but it helps with the flow of the overall presentation. First, let me talk a little bit about where we are in terms of our enrollment in fall of 2021. We are down off of our numbers from fall of 2020. And in fact, and I'll get into this more as I walk through these slides, we're down off of our historic peak by a considerable degree. I've arranged this slide to talk a little bit about the bottom line is, and this is all headcount enrollment. The bottom line is the UW system total. As you can see, we're about down a little over 1%, which is, as I'll talk about, not terrible given the circumstances we're in. But the number that I really want you to have your eye on is the number on the middle line there of our branch campuses. This is the former UW colleges. And since, well, for a number of years, we've seen a fairly substantial decline in what is essentially the two-year piece, the two-year campus piece of our system. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I did want to draw attention to it. So a decline of over 11% in this year. Here's the enrollment by institution. You should have the slides. I won't walk through all of this, but the point that I wanted to make with this slide is that things are not the same all over. That some of our campuses have in fact managed to have fairly substantial growth, Green Bay in particular, over the last year. And in fact, that some of these are on a trend of growth. Obviously, Madison has done very well over the last several years. You had a question for the LFB analyst about the impact of COVID. And this is something we've spent a lot of time looking at. Nothing good has come out of COVID in terms of enrollment. I mean, it's hurt us, it's hurt our retention, it's hurt students' ability to successfully complete courses. Everyone has struggled. We've done our best to ameliorate that, and we've been pretty successful with it. As you can see, and I've switched from total enrollment to undergraduate enrollment because the graduate thing is a whole other matter. We could talk about it if you all have questions. But on an undergraduate level, from fall 20 to 21, nationally, comparatively, the decline was around 3.5% versus our 1.6%. Again, remember, undergraduates is slightly different than the earlier number. Public 4 years declined 2.5%, UW system declined 1.1%, and public 2 years declined 6%. Now, that's an area where we actually did, again, pointing this out before, worse than the national average, and we declined 11.5%. Now, if you look at that, you see very similar sorts of things when you look at the same pattern. If you go pre-COVID, because of course, fall 2020 was a COVID year, COVID semester as well. And so, but when we look at that, the pattern holds. We've successfully prevented the losses from running out of control. And that's largely because of the leadership of President Thompson and the chancellors and the leadership on the campuses aggressively pursuing, strategies to make sure students were in communication and able to continue their studies effectively. All right, so that's the immediate term. That's fall of 2021. That's the things that have happened during this whole COVID crisis. But what does it look like in the longer term? Because really, I think this is a much more important piece to this. As you can see, here's the overall trend in enrollment, and exactly as noted, that the peak of enrollment for us, as well as for our colleagues at WTCS, was during the Great Recession, during immediately following it. We had two things going on. We had really bad economic times when people looked for reskilling and retraining. But we also had a relative peak. We had the kind of end of what we refer to as the baby boom echo. And two things drive whether or not drive the enrollment on our campuses, and they are demography and secondarily, the economy. So not surprisingly, we see that peak around 2011, 2010 through 2012. And then as we begin to see the number of high school graduates drop off towards the middle of the decade and the economy improve, we totally predictably see the decline that we see. What's most concerning to us in terms of our managing our enrollment is that those declines have not arrested, that we have not turned that around in the last few years, when we have actually seen an increase in the number of high school graduates relative to where we were at mid-decade. Now let me kind of I'll come back to that. Let me put this in a little bit more context. Here is kind of since 2007, the enrollment in Wisconsin public higher education. It's helpful because what you can see is if you drew a trend line, you would see very similar trend lines between ourselves and our colleagues at WTCS. WTCS has taken a bigger hit over this period than we have. They're down about 18% from their peak, whereas we're down slightly less than 10% from our peak. But times are tough generally in terms of enrollment in higher education. Here is, again, kind of bringing a little more information to this. The line on the top, and I have an analyst who is in love with using colors in these things, and he prepared this. I hope it's clear to y'all. The line on the top, which is in orange, follows the Wisconsin resident enrollment. The bars on the bottom are the unemployment rate. So what we see is, you can see that the spike when we get to 2010 in unemployment. That drives up our enrollment, but this is really more reflective of again, a modification on what we would expect to see based on the demography of the state. So when we have a lot of 18 to 25-year-olds, we have a lot of enrollment. When we have high unemployment, we have even more. So the peak was higher and the low in the middle of this last decade was lower than we would have thought it would be, precisely because of the unemployment conditions interacting with the demography. Here's what it looks like going forward. I said that we're at a relative, and this is from the Western Interstate Council on Higher Education, something the gold standard of where we get our enrollment projections from, because it's not us, it's not anybody in the state, it's done kind of nationally. As you can see, if you look at the first several, actually, yellow lines, we're at a pretty good number. And you get out towards the end of that, around 2030, we really do see a drop off in the number of high school graduates, and that is going to create a set of challenges in its own right. The problem that we consider the most significant one that we are facing right now in terms of enrollment is in the realm of participation. Along the top line there, this is the number of immediate new participants, immediate new freshmen coming to a UW institution after high school. The line along the top is the percentage that we're getting of the total. Now you can see most of the time there, we're between high 31, just short of 32, and just over 33. But we can just call it 32%. If you ran that line back to 1980 or 1984, don't want to, no hyperbole, just the facts. 1984, we are at 32%. On almost 40-year timeline of that. We are now facing a series of years in which we've seen that drop to 27%. Now that may not sound enormously significant, but a 5% loss on something that had been that solid is a significant concern, and it's something that we have our eyes very much on. And that goes through 2020, the last year we have data, so we don't really know what it's going to look like for this year. But again, COVID has made nothing better. And so there is no reason to believe that that's going to improve in the immediate term. Now, just if the colleagues from WTCS were here, they could speak to this as well. But let me just say that we have recently conducted a study with the help of DPI in order to track all the folks who graduated from Wisconsin public high schools in the last several years. In 2015, about 59% went to some form of higher education. In 2019, pre-COVID, 56% did. So this is, we are actually seeing less high school graduates from Wisconsin choosing to go to college anywhere. That's public, that's private, that's in-state, that's out-of-state. Just less people choosing to go. During that period, higher education or Wisconsin public higher education has only lost about 1% of that total, and we've lost that to out-of-state institutions. So we've had some drop off in terms of the share we're getting, but the real problem is that there are Wisconsin public high school graduates who are not choosing to go to college at all. Just they're not pursuing it. For us, and again, now, and this is going to switch back up a little bit here. Our branch campuses, former UW colleges, are where we've lost these students. That we have seen the enrollment there, we've seen the participation at the branch campuses decline. It was declining as early as 2015, and it has continued its decline to the present. We are struggling with this particular problem because, for a variety of reasons, but it has led to a series of reorganizations of that sector, which do not seem to have effectively arrested this decline. All right. That's kind of the overview of these areas. And I have a few more slides that address some other questions that you all specifically asked, but perhaps I should stop there and ask if you all want to dig into the demography and the enrollment.
We can do that. Do you have, you conducted a study, I'm wondering, did you draw any conclusions as to why there was a decline in participation in new freshmen?
Well, we're not quite there yet. We're trying to make sure that, because when you get to a conclusion like that, you want to make sure that it's absolutely ironclad evidence on it. But what we do see is that it's our branch campuses, and it's also the two-year technical colleges, that this is the area in which we're being hit the hardest. Now, we do see a surge in students doing early college at Oshkosh and Green Bay, particularly. And of course, the institution that is perhaps least attractive to the students who would otherwise be entering in a two-year college, Madison, is also the university which we've seen the greatest gains. So we really have kind of narrowed this to the access point through two-year options, just generally, is a place where clearly the state of Wisconsin, not simply the UW system, but the state of Wisconsin is struggling to bring students in by that route and struggling to move them along once we actually do have them in place.
I think the most surprising, looking at these numbers, it wasn't a lot of the four-year institutions seem to be pretty good in my area. Green Bay, obviously, as you mentioned, but Oshkosh is right up there. Senator Fine and I represent. But it is those former two-year colleges where, I mean, that's significant. I'm looking at Fox Valley, that would be the heart of my district, 1830 down to 714, and Fond du Lac 794 in 2010 down to 281 now. Are we, we've got the merger's been in place now for a while. Are we seeing students opting now that they're kind of rolled into the 4 years? Are they just opting to go directly to the 4-year now and sidestep that branch campus?
I think we do see some of that. I think that does explain some of the change since we actually did the full reorganization. But I think that what was striking when we did this study with, well, first of all, what's striking is participation rate is dropping for us in a fairly substantial way. And then when we looked at the students choosing to enter higher education at all, we saw that number decline. So although we are seeing some of the students who would just have gone, instead of going to Rock County, they're now going to University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. That doesn't seem to be the full explanation. The decline seems to be somewhat independent of that and being driven by I'm not sure how to characterize it. The students don't want to go to these two-year campuses, or they don't feel they have access to these two-year campuses. And again, not simply us, but also our, with many of the WTCS institutions as well. There has been talk in the higher education kind of journals and the like about the declining interest in associate degrees. But I do think that it's fair to say that the kind of timeline here, it doesn't really match up with that very well. And the decline in access means that this is not a student who was like, I could do an associate, I could do a bachelor's, and choosing the bachelor's. They're just choosing, no, I could just pass. And that is obviously a significant concern.
I want to come back and talk demographics in a moment, but I just want to turn to the committee first. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested in, you said that there was some surveys done about what the mood is of what the cause is for this. And I get that there's kind of a mind to how to correct it and get back to the heydays of high student enrollment and trying to promote that growth. But I'm curious if this may just, like, if those surveys are saying that this may be the new normal. Just based off the high cost of higher education, and we're seeing it in and I know that this is the committee where we're focused specifically on the universities and technical colleges, but this is something that's plaguing the rest of the country in terms of people my age choosing not to get married, not to have kids, not to buy a house because they're saddled with a lot of college debt. And then this generation that's coming into the colleges is seeing that and seeing their older siblings, going through having a ton of debt, having to move back home. And I'm just curious if there's surveys that bear that out, beyond just the anecdotal evidence of people saying, well, maybe there's just not a benefit to going to college for 4 years, getting a degree, and then having to have moved back home because you're not, it's the other side of the promise isn't being fulfilled of you go to school for 4 years, you have this higher education, you're going to make extra money, you're going to be able to buy a house, buy a car, have a family, etc. Obviously we have a mind of the pandemic right here, but the numbers are showing that there's a change in the mood of the public overall towards their relationship with higher education. So I'm curious if there's a beyond just what we're seeing in front of us here with these institutions, if this is something that's happening around the country, and if there is survey results bearing that out beyond just the anecdotal.
Well, I think I can answer that in 2 ways. One, the question as to whether this is the new normal, kind of broadly speaking. I do think that there is substantial evidence that the higher education landscape is shifting fairly dramatically at present. Not to get personal, but my children are 100% comfortable with taking high school classes online, and I have no doubt that they'll be 100% comfortable with taking college courses online. Just that right there, that kind of overcoming that barrier if I've been saying this in 2019, you all would be like, my kids aren't going to go online to take college. But I think that really has changed. And that is a real disruptor for how things go forward. So most everything else I'm going to say about this is based on kind of a long-term understanding of the patterns in higher education. But that's on everybody's lips right now, that we're in kind of the middle of a very disruptive period in it. In terms of debt, I do think that there is at least the perception that student debt is very high. The UW system, when we look at the level of student debt that we have, we do not see a dramatic rise in the level of student debt, nor have we've actually seen a decline in the level of unmet need that is being handled by our financial aid. But that's only part of the story. Again, it is important to think about the fact that when you're going into college, a perception that debt is a problem is more than sufficient. It's when you get done and you have $26,000, $27,000 of debt, and you're going into a career in which you're going to very reasonably be able to pay that back in 10 years, 5-10 years. That's all well and good, but when you're looking down, you're looking at the front end of this, and you're looking at you're 18 and you're thinking about doing that. The students who are most sensitive to taking on that debt are the students who are from first-generation families, from low-income families, from underrepresented minority families, all of whom are much less likely to take on debt than other students. So I think that definitely that there is a perception of that, and that might be driving part of this. And it would certainly be reasonable to think that that would have some of the impacts that we would talk about with the 2 years, because again, those same groups of people are the folks who disproportionately utilize the kind of 2-year points of entry into higher education.
Senator Nass. Senator Urbanbach. Senator Satchel. Senator Royce.
No, thank you.
Senator Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question, are we going to get copies of these slides?
I did.
Yes.
Thank you. That's not my question. You had mentioned that we are losing some more kids going to out-of-state schools.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a particular school that's stealing a lot of them, or is it just spread out across the world?
And that's a really interesting question, because it's one of the first things that we asked when we were doing this study is like, is there somebody who's picking our pocket?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
honestly. But no, what we found was this is kind of, this is a broader trend. It's out-of-state publics, it's out-of-state privates. It does not appear that there is any one.
No one's eating their lunch.
Yeah, it's not a single state, because one of the things that we did look at was the states with which we have reciprocity agreements. No, I mean, they have a somewhat higher enrollment, but it has been stable over time. So there's just no reason to believe, there's nobody who's getting us, as it were.
a follow-up to that. So like University of Minnesota, we have a reciprocity agreement with them. Are they seeing these trends as well?
Everyone is seeing
Okay.
these basic trends. I don't have their number, I probably should have had their numbers, but I don't have their numbers in hand. But yes, everybody is seeing these trends. I have engaged in a number of conference calls with like system data folks like myself from around the country. Some are seeing it worse, some are seeing it a little bit better, but all are seeing the same basic trend that we're talking about.
Senator Paff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is this. I recognize there's demographic changes that are taking place in this state. All we have to do is go to some of my rural high schools out here in Western Wisconsin, and we recognize that there's enrollment changes. But there still is a need for training in personal and professional development. I hear that time and time again. Where is the University of Wisconsin system when it comes to attracting non-traditional students and returning adults? And what greater focus can we do on that? I appreciate your comments in regards to the high school enrollments, but I'd like to hear more about the non-traditional students that are seeking to develop the professional skills to continue to advance in their career. Thank you.
Absolutely, and this is an area of some considerable focus, specifically through our UW Extended Campus, which has a whole series of, UW Extended Campus is not, despite the fact that it has UW at the front, campus, an institution in its own right. Rather, what it does is coordinate cooperative programs, collaborative programs between individual institutions, and it is oriented towards online, and it is oriented with a laser focus on specific needs, interests of folks within the state of Wisconsin. They are one of the bright spots. Again, I probably should have thought to bring their numbers, but they have seen substantial enrollment growth over this period, over the COVID period. It is always tricky because with online programs which serve non-traditional students, because you only really find out if there's genuinely demand when you stand up a program. And programs stood up online are in fact, particularly by some place that has to bring in faculty, bring in resources from our individual campuses. Basically, you're putting a fair amount out there before you see any hope of any results. But they are in fact doing that. They're advancing programs each year. They're building up this capacity to effectively serve these non-traditional students. We all recognize that this is likely to be a growth area, that over time, what we're going to do is move from a somewhat transactional relationship in which you come to us, you do certain things, we give you a degree, to a much more relationship-oriented thing where you come to us, you get training, or you get your degree, then perhaps you come back, and then you go out and you're in the workforce for a while, then you come back again. You can come to us and kind of continue that journey through training and education throughout your career. And so that kind of orientation with the non-traditional students is how we hope to more effectively serve them.
Just a real quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for those comments. But I think these numbers that we're seeing when it comes to demographics, I would encourage the UW to continue to double down on those efforts. And I stand ready to assist you and work with this committee as we move forward with that, because it is important that we continue to provide individuals with opportunities for personal and professional growth as they move forward in their career. So thank you.
Senator Darling. So Ben, just getting back to the point that was brought up on demographics. I was just reading, and I don't know if you saw WisPolitics this morning, one of their section stories highlighted a study by Forward Analytics that showed that the under 18 population in Wisconsin declined by 4.3% in this last 10-year period, more than double that which in the prior 10-year period from 2000 to 2010, resulting in 44,000 fewer babies being born in this last 10 years. As you indicated, the biggest driver for your enrollment is high school seniors, right? Graduating.
Absolutely.
So how do we how do you anticipate, you're not going to control the birth rate.
Right.
I'm not asking you to do that. How do you anticipate the UW system adjusting to the fact that, at least right now in Wisconsin, demographically speaking, we're headed in the wrong direction?
Well, in some ways, this is the times. They come in, they go out in terms of birth rate. This is something that higher education, and I believe we had Dr. Graw in for another hearing, has done a lot to bring our attention to the fact that we do, in fact, we're not in it now. That's the thing. Right now, we are cruising along, not perfect, but not bad in terms of demography. When you get to the end of the 2020s, we are in fact faced with a very serious change in the population, in that we will see these high school numbers drop off quite rapidly all the way through the mid 2030s. And beyond that, it's hard to say. Again, the question of the birth rate, right now, is what drives things towards the end of the 2030s. So all of that said, two things are key here. One, there is a substantial population of folks out there right now, and this is the problem with the lowered participation rate, who could be well served by college education, either with us or with WTCS, but a college education, getting some kind of post-secondary credential to allow them to pursue a career that has a solid future. So what we want to do, first of all, is dig into the people who aren't going. We need to get that participation rate back up. But beyond that, 32% may have been where we were cruising, but it is not ideal. If we want to hit that 60% that we sometimes talk about in terms of people in the state with a credential, we need to do better than that. So dig in deeper. But then the second part actually leads right out of that non-traditional, the question on the non-traditional students. One thing that we can pretty much guarantee is change. The things are likely to change very rapidly in our economy. Again, just as we're in a period of disruption for higher education, we're in a period where our economy is very much disrupted by all the things that have gone on in the last couple of years. So what we want to do is be in the position, again, to have that relationship with our students, with our alumni, where we provide the kind of ongoing education that they need to effectively meet those demands going forward. So, I mean, again, thinking about my children, their capabilities are so far beyond me in any number of areas, particularly around information technology. It's kind of a bit of a cliche, but it's true. And I do this for a living. They will be in the same position that I am in 20 years, that they will need the ability to rapidly access new kinds of education, new kinds of training and the like. And I think that that's the other big piece of this. So digging deeper, getting the students that we should be getting already and we want to get, but then also being available to make sure that the education that they've received is the education they need, not just for tomorrow, not just for the first job, but all the way through their career.
Well, I thank you for that. As you are aware, this committee is very concerned just with the sustainability of higher education in Wisconsin. We generated a report earlier this year addressed specifically to that, trying to provide a roadmap, and part of bringing both the technical colleges and you in today to talk about enrollment numbers is just to build out on some of those things that we had seen growing from the previous hearing that we had earlier in this year. And we will continue to look at this and take this information and factor in to the overall direction I think this committee will be headed later this year. So thank you for your time and for the questions, and I will make sure to get the slides out to the committee members so they have those at their disposal. At this time, we are going to, right on schedule, at this time, I'm going to ask Annie Bowers from the Cicero Institute if she would like to come forward. This committee, it is an introduction to Annie. This committee's report in May 2021 titled The Wisconsin Roadmap to Success in Higher Education for the 21st Century included recommendations for a host of higher education reforms, including a regionalization plan for UW schools. Since the release of the report, constituents and stakeholders around the state have considered and commented on the recommendations that were found in that report. The Cicero Institute, an innovative national think tank based in Austin, Texas, reached out to me with an idea they believe may be a good fit for the reform proposals. Cicero saw the recommendation on the reforming of UW into partnership regions and thought their proposal on performance-based funding would align with the goals laid out in that report. I invited Cicero here today to present to the committee their proposal and findings about performance-based funding in higher education systems. Annie Bowers, the education policy manager for the Cicero Institute, will testify before us today. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you, Chairperson Roth and senators for having me today. As introduced, I'm an education policy manager for the Cicero Institute. We're based in Austin, Texas, and we're a policy organization that does research on a variety of areas. My presentation today is going to cover our research on performance funding for higher education, some of the best practices that we found that have come out of that research. I'm going to also cover our proposal for performance funding that's based on alumni earnings. We call it earnings-based funding. And the ways that that type of performance funding could complement the objectives outlined in the May report with the plan for regionalization.
And for the committee members who are here on the telephone, we can make, I know you can see them on the screen if you're logged into the Zoom session, but we will make the copies of this report available, this presentation available to committee members as well.
I could just tell you when to change the slide. Yeah, could you go to the next one?
We're still learning technology.
Isn't technology great when it works?
Okay, try now.
There we
Oh,
go.
there we go. Okay, perfect. All right, so performance funding for higher education has been around since 1979. Tennessee was the first state to implement it. Since then, only 7 states have never used performance funding for their higher education systems. So clearly it's a popular idea. In 2020, Cicero surveyed all existing performance funding formulas and found that the most typical performance measures include usually completion or graduation rates, retention rates, transfers, job placement, or degrees awarded in fields of strategic emphasis for the state. There are usually also adjustments for traditionally disadvantaged or underprepared student populations to enter higher education. This is normally low-income students, Pell-eligible students, sometimes underrepresented minorities, adult learners, and sometimes ex-military too. So I'm just going to walk through some of these best practices that we've found. The first one, anytime you're setting up an incentive system, obviously you want to think about unintended consequences. An example of this is, for example, if you want to reward institutions for higher graduation rates, a lot of studies have shown that what actually ends up happening is unintentional consequences of grade inflation, lessening of academic rigor, making the programs shorter, so you need to complete less credit hours. And then additionally, you need to keep unintended consequences in mind, specifically for disadvantaged student populations. So for example, if you're trying to increase your retention rates, a way to artificially do that easily is to enroll less students who you think might be less prepared for college. So obviously it's important to provide additional incentives if you want to do that, to meet those students where they are, and provide resources for schools to invest in mentoring or other proven methods that help those students succeed. Third, dependable data. That's pretty self-explanatory. You need to have data that's reliable and accurately reflects student success institutions. The fourth principle, Cicero believes that competitive systems where innovative ideas can emerge bottom up, be proven, and spread, create better outcomes for everyone involved. So we like to design our performance funding in this way. And this is just because local actors, like the people who work with students day in, day out, they know what methods are going to work best for their students and their institutions where they are. So we think those are the people who should probably be making the decisions day to day on how to achieve the ultimate outcomes that are set by the state. So one way to do this is to set up just one competitive funding pool for all institutions that holds all the performance funding. And then you create a formula that assigns shares of funding from that total pool. So this way, from year to year, each institution is working to increase their share of the total funding. 5 strong incentives. So this varies from program to program, state to state. Some states, such as Illinois, they have less than 1% of their total higher ed funding dedicated to performance measures. Other states like North Dakota and Ohio's 2-year system have 100% of their state funding that goes into those systems dedicated to performance. To give you kind of an idea of the landscape, about 40% of systems that have performance funding have less than 5% tied to performance. And about a quarter have 70% or more of their funding tied to performance. The rest fall somewhere in between. Simplicity, this is a pretty intuitive one. Less performance measures in the funding formula mean a stronger incentive on each measure. And any unclear goals or too many goals mean that institutions won't know what to focus on and are going to find it more difficult to come up with effective strategies to meet the goals that the state wants, the outcomes that the state wants. Sustainability is very important. So about half, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but about half of the states that have implemented performance funding before have also discontinued it. And half of those have also reinstated it again, a different version. So it has a very complicated history over the past 40 years or so in the US. So one thing I recommend for sustainability is that the formula doesn't prescribe a specific dollar amount for the legislature to allocate. Instead, it leaves the total amount of system-wide funding up to the legislature. And like I said earlier, assigns a share of that funding pool to institutions. Another way to make it sustainable is to build the performance funding into the base allocations for institutions. So this is just their general operation funding or their funding for all expenditures that they get from the legislature. Because studies have shown that when performance funding is a new or additional funding amount in tight fiscal years, that's the first thing to get cut, creating an unreliable incentive. And the last thing, year-to-year stability. So you can use like 3-year rolling averages for the performance measures to make it more stable year to year. You can also use stop loss provisions that keep institutions from losing more than a certain amount of funding per year. And phase-in periods are always recommended at the beginning, just so institutions have time to begin to implement new strategies. So like I said, I was a little small in there, but so there are 22 states that currently have performance funding, or 26 that currently have performance funding. 4 of those have performance funding with earnings included as a measure, alumni earnings. Let's see. And there are a bunch of states that I know are considering doing this in 2022, or in Texas, since they have session every other year in 2023. Florida is considering including more earnings in their performance funding. Texas as well. Missouri, West Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina are all considering creating performance funding with earnings in it. One thing that I always point out is the success of the Texas State Technical Colleges. 100% of their state funding is based on the earnings of their graduates. And this was implemented in 2014. Since then, they've seen a 117% increase in their overall graduate earnings. So that's over 7 years. And they also enroll more than 60% of their students are Pell students. So they have a very high low-income student population. Last year, the Florida Technical and Community Colleges implemented a new performance funding model that is based on job placement and alumni earnings. California did this in 2018, so there's not enough data yet to see results. Kansas and Florida also have earnings in their performance funding. But these are, in Florida, it's about 2% of state funding is based on earnings, Kansas about 1%. But they've seen slight improvements over the past couple of years. So this is a little diagram that kind of explains the formula that we propose. We see alumni earnings as an excellent performance measure for all students, but especially for students who attend college to increase their career prospects. So this works really well, obviously, for technical colleges, works pretty well for community colleges because most of those student populations are going there to get skills that are directly applicable to the job market. So we start at the beginning with, we do a shorter term and a longer term earnings measure, so 6 years after enrollment and 10 years after enrollment. And then we also take the earnings just for the Pell eligible student population, same 6 and 10 years after enrollment. And then we also include a measure for Pell eligible student population enrollment. Then we weight those, combine them, and that turns into, we call it in our model bills, a rewarding workforce readiness score. This is just the performance score for each institution. That is multiplied by enrollment. That's the institution score. And then each institution score is divided by the sum of all institution scores for the system, creating their share of the system-wide performance funding. So we normally recommend that the measures within the earnings-based funding formula are divided with 40% on total earnings, 30% on Pell earnings, 30% on Pell enrollment earnings. Those obviously can be altered as needed. Earnings-based funding can be combined with other performance funding or other non-performance funding to align with state goals. However, the legislature decides. Some of the outcomes, it aligns institutions' financial incentives with students' financial incentives. That's the main outcome. It also aligns state higher education outcomes with in-demand high-wage careers. And it creates accountability for taxpayer higher education dollars. To get the earnings data, the best method right now is using the state unemployment insurance wage records. This is how Florida does it, this is how Texas does it. And for you all, that would come from the Department of Workforce Development. For any students who have go out of state, if you know where most of your students end up going, a lot of states create interstate data sharing agreements for the unemployment insurance records. Texas State Technical College also, for any alumni who they can't find anywhere, they ask for voluntary submissions from those alumni, and that works pretty well for them. I know that with these methods, they're able to collect about 98% of their graduates' wages. So turning to the committee report from May, the roadmap for higher education. This can work in a variety of ways, as long as you keep those best practices in mind. It can work with the regionalization. So I think you all are thinking of having 4 regions perhaps, and so each one would maybe have about 25% of the share, and then it would go up or down based on the performance measures. It's also an option to just have the individual institutions compete with one another. And it's important for that funding pool to only be for similar institutions with similar missions. So one consideration is that the research institutions like Madison and Milwaukee could be left out of that funding pool and could just have the other universities compete with one another. As far as some of the objectives from the report that earnings-based funding would also achieve, the reevaluation of programs that produce few graduates are duplicative or result in poor earnings and job prospects. Earnings-based funding would obviously shine a light on that. It would encourage schools to specialize and focus on their strengths, to direct those resources towards those successful programs. And that in turn could redefine some of those missions for some of the mission statements for those schools. Earnings-based funding is all about increasing efficiency while maintaining quality. One interesting part of it is if you don't just take the earnings of graduates, but take the earnings of all students who enroll in the institution, because students who end up graduating and earning a degree will earn more on average. That also works to improve the retention and graduation rates and placement in a good job for the institution, for those students. And the last thing is this helps to align incentives so that it can strengthen funding for those institutions that are very successful and helping students to success in their careers. Yeah, that is all I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. I know I have some questions here and we'll turn to the committee in a moment. Let me just start by saying this. Is there when you look at how this works in other states, I believe you mentioned some states, if I heard you right, Kansas, 1% is based on performance funding. Other states were up to 100%. Is there a number in there that you've seen throughout the 50 states that is a good number to focus on?
Yeah, I think I would always recommend that you do at least 25% based on performance. And then however many performance measures you want to have inside that, there, some states have up to 12 within their performance measures, some just have 1. But yeah, I think 25% is the generally accepted number to actually see improvement. Yeah.
You mentioned 3 performance measures here in the report. One was alumni earnings, Pell enrollment, if I have that right. Well, Pell enrollment and Pell alumni earnings. What's typical for these other states? What is alumni earnings what they're focused on more?
I would say most states are focused on graduation rates.
Graduation rates, okay.
The reason why we focus on earnings is because graduation rates, while they normally increase earnings for students, and that's definitely a significant step, just obtaining a degree does not guarantee that that degree will be useful in the real world in your career. And so the fact that the degree pays off in your career can be a good indicator of the relevance of that degree to students' careers.
No question about it. Some degrees have a better lifetime payoff than others. So when you've seen other states that have gone down this road, let's just say, for instance, let's say that they want to make alumni earnings. They want to focus in on that. What kind of behavior then do you see changing at the institution of higher learning to drive that kind of an outcome? What kinds of things are they doing to try and increase the earning potential of their graduates?
So a lot of high touch mentoring with the students who need it. So, a lot of advising, improving career services practices for students, improving apprenticeship opportunities, internship opportunities. And what I've seen in the Texas State Technical Colleges, because we're based in Austin, I talk to them a lot. They're programs that are not producing good outcomes for students. They have closed, I think, 13 programs by this point and opened a lot of other programs. And another thing they do is they have 10 different locations in the state, and all of those locations, they have relationships with local employers in that area because the technical colleges really are very local institutions. So they have relationships with those employers, and they have open communications with employers about what the employers are looking for from employees. what kind of skills they need, things like that. But I'll also say that the reason why we like this kind of setting an ultimate outcome and then allowing those bottom-up innovative solutions to emerge is that there could be unexpected practices that work really well and that could emerge.
Wisconsin's one of those, some states are very urban, I think in New Jersey, some are very rural, think of Alaska or some of our western states. We've got a good mix here in Wisconsin. We've got our urban areas, our suburban areas, our rural areas. How does this play out for our institutions in rural areas versus urban ones? Are some gonna win, or lose in that comparison? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, this has definitely been a concern in some other states as well. One thing so typically, right, urban areas have higher costs of living and those jobs will carry higher earnings than rural areas. So one thing that's possible, and in Missouri, I guess it's kind of interesting because if you potentially exclude Madison, Milwaukee, most of the other areas are pretty rural, I think. So they're kind of on a more even playing field, maybe. But one thing that can be done is to adjust the earnings. So in the unemployment insurance, you can see the location of the employer. So you can adjust the earnings based on the cost of living in that area if desired.
Annie, I'm going to turn to the committee here for a moment. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. This is interesting. I'm not as familiar with the group that you represent, Cicero Institute, other than the name Cicero, which it's interesting that obviously the history of Cicero was he was poor and he came up as an orator and emphasized the importance of rhetoric, and to my knowledge didn't make a lot of money. So it's kind of strange to me to hear about the emphasis about trying to increase earnings potential. I don't remember that in any of Cicero's works of saying we need to increase the earning potential of the masses. It was more about education of the masses, the importance of democracy, the importance of rhetoric. And so I guess I'm kind of left thinking about the purpose of higher education, which is, increase the common good, making sure that public education is accessible to all, and that those who seek it find enrichment and find fulfillment. And I'm just wondering, I gotta believe this isn't the first time you've thought of this or heard this question, but I'm curious if you feel like the outlines of putting forward certain incentives on emphasizing income-based incentives disincentivizes goals of people to become artists, or if you're looking at the public good of expanding the public good, people going into social work, people to become public educators, where we're having a real problem recruiting people into the teaching profession in Wisconsin. So how do you account for that if you do think that's the case, and if you don't think that's the case, how is it not that the case that it's an overemphasis on of just putting dollar amounts to students and graduates?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for your question. So yeah, I definitely agree. I was a philosophy and music major in school, so I can empathize. I will say one thing is that the top reason that students attend college still is to increase their earnings potential. But you're right, there are public service professions that are definitely of very strong emphasis to the state, such as teaching or social work, that should be addressed in this kind of model. So a couple of things. One, you can pair this earnings-based funding model with other performance measures. So this earnings-based funding model could, let's say, account for 25% of the performance funding And you could also have 25% based on completion rates. You could have 25% based on the career prospects of teachers or other public service careers. 25% just based on continuing education, people who go to graduate school, job placement, things like that. Our position is just that earnings should definitely be a part of the conversation, one of the performance measures.
Senator Royce? Senator Fine?
One question on the earnings-based funding, the pie chart you have here. You look at alumni earnings and you look at Pell alumni earnings. Why are they broke out into two different categories?
Sure, yeah.
Because they're all graduates, correct?
Yes, yes. When you look at the earnings of just the low-income student population, and that's normally measured by those who receive Pell Grants, in most institutions, I would say 99% of institutions in the US, the Pell earnings are significantly lower than all alumni earnings. So we would hate to put an incentive in front of institutions to say, oh, you just need to increase the earnings of your graduates, because that could create an incentive to enroll less Pell students. And we would rather create an incentive for them to meet those students where they are and invest in those students. So we have those separated just because we want to place a specific emphasis on earnings for those low-income students.
Is that the way most states do it when they use earnings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Senator Path?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to hear the testimony. I guess my question is this. Is there any adjustments built into this formula for people starting a family? Having a child, being at home with your children in their early age. How do we go forward with that? What do we do when it comes to the need for childcare in the in this workplace right now, where there's a shortage of childcare providers? And a member of a working adult that is out of school 6 to 10 years or whatever this formula has, they have to take shortened hours, or they have to leave their current job to take a different job, work with the family. I recognize the performance based earnings, and I understand that model, and I appreciate your testimony. I just, before we go much further with something like this, I mean, we here in Western Wisconsin, we're doing our very best to make sure that we can continue to grow our economy, and get as many workers in the workforce as we can. So I would welcome the opportunity to hear more from you. But I also want to make sure that we provide our workers and our employers, as well as our universities and technical college, with these tools they need to succeed. So thank you.
Sure, thank you, Senator. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, we recommend that the earnings used in the formula are only for people employed at the time it's collected. So if someone is choosing to be out of the workforce temporarily to start a family, they would not positively or negatively impact the average earnings for an institution or a region. They just wouldn't be calculated into the average, so they wouldn't be a zero. But does that answer your question?
I thank you for that. That's a help. The other thing is that if somebody has to take a different job with part-time hours or something like that because of a family situation, the childcare or taking care of their adult parents or whatever it may be. And so I just ask, as we go forward, with building formulas like this, that there is those kind of situations that are considered and within this process. So thank you for being here.
Sure, thank you. I can respond to that quickly. Sure. Another option is called unemployment insurance wage record enhancement. And that can add reporting for employers. And one thing that could be added is part-time or full-time status. And that would be an easy way to make sure that anyone working part-time and maybe earning lower wages over a quarter would not negatively impact an institution.
Thank you, Senator Darling. Okay, Senator Darling wants to ask a question. We're having just some technical issues, so we'll just momentarily wait with her. You mentioned, I think, 2014 Texas technical colleges. Is that the latest example you have of someone? I mean, that would seem like a full throttle approach here, 100% everything based on. Is that the most significant example we have in the United States of the state adopting this?
Yes, this is.
Do they, and is that fully based on alumni earnings, or is it broken on the other categories?
Yep, their formula, it's called the returned value formula, and it is the only performance measure, and it is alumni earnings.
And I understand the point I think that Senator Larson was making, which was, certainly earnings is one thing, but it's true. At the end of the day, we don't need everyone we need people to do things, out of a labor of love and passion to make sure that we're well represented in these different facets of our society. My question though is, do you have any knowledge of any surveys or reports that were done of these Texas students graduating on their satisfaction with because at the end of the day, I think satisfaction with your education in the institution you're going to, feeling that it was worth it is important too. Do we know anything about those students graduating from the Texas Technical College system?
I don't have anything specific that I can use right now off the top of my head, but I do think the students are very satisfied with the education they've received there. It's become a very popular idea in Texas, and the technical colleges actually they were volunteered to do this when the legislature asked if any of the systems would like to do performance funding. So they said, yeah, we want students to get their money's worth from us, hold ourselves accountable. So,
Senator Darling.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Yes, I have had technical difficulties, but this is very interesting and I really applaud you. My question would be, you mentioned that Texas closed down 13 programs and opened up others. My basic question is, how do we get our majors in colleges and techs to align with the need for the real world of work? Because there are lots of careers that you can earn more money, but often those majors have waiting lists or they don't exist. How did Texas or Florida align their majors with the real world of work where the earnings can be higher? So where there are job opportunities like engineering, teaching, nursing.
So they basically have opened up communications with employers, and I think partnering with their workforce departments, they are looking for where there is demand, because if you have a degree in a field where there is a lot of hiring, a lot of demand, you are a lot more likely to earn more than if your degree is not relevant to the job market and you end up working at something unrelated. So yeah, a lot of it is employer-driven partnerships.
Can I have a follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you may.
Well, the university system is very hard to move things around here. I think that's probably true in most states. There's a lot of there are a lot of issues with how do you get the university to be flexible and nimble, because you put people in positions, they get tenure, and then it's hard to shift. Did Florida or Texas have any specific strategies to work with the systems to get those shifts? You mentioned closing down 13 programs, as I mentioned earlier. How did they actually do that? And you talked about talking with employers and looked at where the needs are, but how do you get that aligned with the majors that are in the universities, the needs of the state in terms of employment and the opportunities as majors in the university and tech system. Because a lot of our demand there, they go to the schools or tech and they're waiting lists to get into those majors. Can you talk to that, how Florida or Texas made those shifts?
Sure, I'm more familiar with Texas. And I know that their chief innovation officer there has actually designed a system where it's like a database where employers can report on the skills that their new employees have and how useful those skills are, and also what skills they're looking for. So it's all skills based rather than degree based. And so they report on those skills, what they're looking for, what they're getting, what's useful, what's not useful. And the Texas State Technical College is then able to take that information and adjust what they're doing based on that. As far as waiting lists, I think earnings-based funding would probably help with that a lot. If you place an incentive in front of institutions and say, you will receive more state funding if your alumni are earning more, it seems like they would probably want to grow those programs, hire more faculty for those programs that are placing students into higher paying jobs or more in-demand jobs. And address it that way. So that could help with that.
Could I have one more follow-up on Mr.
Yes, you may.
How do you, what would your suggestions be for career development? Okay, there could be the jobs out there. There could be the opportunity out there. The universities and colleges could make shifts in their offerings. How do you, where does career development enter in? Many students, their parents did not go to school. No, many schools do not have active career development departments. So what do you suggest about giving the opportunity for students to learn where the opportunities are and what their skill set, how that their skill set would operate to match up with what's out there for them?
I am not very familiar with the current status of career development within the UW system, but I, in general, would say probably more communication with every single student, like more advising, so assigning career development advisors to every single student so that they can have someone to express their goals for themselves and where their skill sets lie and things like that. But it's not necessarily my area of expertise.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Darling, and thank you, Andy, for your testifying here for us today and providing us with this information you've given, I think, the committee a lot of things that we can think about and kind of work through. So appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would also, I don't want to put Dan on the hot seat here, our alleged counsel attorney, but I'm wondering if you'd be able to prepare for us just a document showing performance funding and how, you know, what percentage we do here in Wisconsin and what those metrics are that we abide by, just so that the committee can contrast that to the report and what we had just heard. Sure. So thank you. That concludes our informational hearing today. We'll now begin the public hearing, and I call this meeting to order. I'll ask the clerk to apply the attendance from the informational hearing to the public hearing. To accommodate a few schedules of bill authors, we'll begin with Senate Bill 728. And in just a moment, I'm going to call Senator Petrowski and Representative Bourne to come before us. Just wanted to give people an opportunity to shuffle in and out of the room. It seems like that has been done.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Appreciate your opportunity to be here and to testify on this important piece of legislation. I say that because I am a co-author. Senator Fine is a co-author.
I don't know though.
Yeah.
Senator Dowling as well.
Well, then maybe we should just be quiet, huh?
Yeah, Senator Dowling as well. I think our job stuff. Welcome, and Senator Petrowski, I'll turn it over to you and Representative Warren.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Committee of Universities and Technical Colleges. I want to thank you for taking the time today to hear and listen to Senate Bill 728. We are very fortunate to have an outstanding engineering program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. However, the program is limited in the number of applicants that can be accepted, and the result is qualified and sorely needed applicants being turned away. We are bringing this bill forward to provide a $1 million down payment as a start to expand the school. This money will be put towards planning and design of the new facility. Engineers are in high demand. This investment will help to attract and educate the best and the brightest in the field. Constructing a new facility where the engineers of tomorrow can receive instruction will enable the UW-Madison to maintain their top ranking among engineering colleges and keep up with facility upgrades being made in surrounding states. The funds allocated in this bill will show that the university and Wisconsin as a whole is committed to excellence and leadership in the field of engineering. Of course, I'm a supporter of the UW. All of my children went there. And I can tell you that in the family, I have 2 engineers. And they work on cutting edge things that are fascinating. But that's our future. And as a side note, my children make much more money than I do. So thank you again, and allowing me to talk about this bill, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, but I think Representative Warren would like to deliver his remarks also.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson Roth and the committee. Appreciate you hearing Senate Bill 728. It's really a pretty simple bill. It takes $1 million in building trust funds and makes it available for planning and design purposes for a new engineering building at UW-Madison. This is a project that was in the last capital budget request. It had a lot of support in both houses as we worked on the capital budget, but it was a pretty big price tag and we just couldn't fit it in the current capital budget. But recognizing all the support both in the legislature and the private sector, as we hear from private sector companies about the need for more engineers coming out of our schools. And also when you look at the amount of private sector support for this project that they've been able to raise at the university, we know it's a priority project in the future. We funded some of the utility work in the current capital budget to kind of keep things moving along and prepare for these future expansions. And we think this planning dollars continues to support a project that really will be a top priority in the next capital budget from all indications, both within discussions in the legislature as well as the private sector. So I think it just makes sense to keep moving forward. And this is not a new appropriation. These funds are available in the Building Trust Fund. This is something that from time to time legislative action has allowed for this use, as well as just the Department of Administration through the administration deciding to use these funds for planning. So it's really what the purpose of those dollars is.
Well, thank you both. My level of understanding Wisconsin geography, I know neither of you represent UW-Madison. Senator Petrowski, you're from northern Wisconsin, Representative Warren, kind of middle Wisconsin. Can you just let us know, why is this important to you, and what effect is this going to have on your districts or other parts of the state, not UW-Madison?
Well, it's important to the whole state. When parts of the state do better, the whole state benefits. In central Wisconsin, we have a lot of businesses that are just looking for engineers. They can't find them. And we're looking at ways that we can increase that availability for engineers, whether they're trained in Madison or someplace else. Stout has an engineering program also. But this is our future and the things that get worked on. I have a daughter-in-law that has worked on almost every cutting edge technology over the last 20 years, from the epoxies for stealth programs, the anthrax sensors, the lithium batteries. And I think we probably just scratched the surface on what is actually possible. And I want to see it happen. I want to see it happen here in Wisconsin.
Thank you. Representative Warren, co-chair of the Finance Committee. I know that particularly in our caucus, the question that always comes back on senators' minds, I mentioned the same with representatives, is just the cost. Can you just walk through, you mentioned just before that we're not talking about new allocation of money. This is money that exists in the state building trust fund. So when we're discussing this in our Senate caucus, what should we be, how should we look at this appropriation of funding?
Yeah, I think I look at it as the funds are available for this purpose. The building trust fund money is used by DOA to do advanced planning, sometimes to maybe tear down buildings for projects that are approved or that they expect to be approved. And a lot of times they take this action on their own. They've done it in the past using funds for projects. I can think of a UW Milwaukee recently. And so we check to see how much is available in the account. There's funds available. And then when these projects move forward and they do the full bonding for the full project, they can replace the million into that trust fund so then it can be used for a future project down the road. So since the money is available, it's used for these type of purposes. We recognize the importance of this project. And so we just thought it was smart to keep it moving forward with the planning. This planning stuff needs to be done before you can put shovels in the ground and things. It sets us up to enumerate it then in the future capital budget. And as the senator said, it affects us all. I mean, we all have businesses in our districts that need engineers. Businesses, private businesses, government needs engineers.
Right.
And we have done things in previous budgets. We have built a new engineering building 4 years ago, I think it was, in the capital budget at Platteville. We created an engineering program at UW Green Bay, I think also 4 years ago, recognizing the need in this industry. And I think this is the next logical step of a university that has an excellent program already and has recognized the need to grow that capacity. That's why this project is in the capital budget. And I'm sure you'll hear more from them on that later. So it just makes sense to keep this moving along, and the money's available in the DCF.
I appreciate that explanation. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward. I guess that you kind of answered it, that there is some funds available in already out there, but I'm just kind of curious and why. I feel like things like this usually go through the building commission. So why is this not going through the building commission?
It's legislation, so it would come through.
It'll still go through the building commission.
Ultimately, eventually it'll go to the building commission, but right now I don't know if the building commission can initiate spending that money on their own. I guess we've never done that.
Not without legislative approval. But there are so many steps. It comes before the building commission many times before the project is completed.
So this will go, just because the legislature does this, doesn't circumvent the building commission process.
I think this is just giving them the go ahead, but it'll still come back to the building commission.
DOA will bring a proposal to the building commission if this passes both houses and the governor signs it, to have them allocate that million to UW to do their planning.
Senator Fine.
Thank you for bringing this forward. One thing I love about it is it expands the capacity at the engineering program. So it brings in more students as well. And two of my biggest employers in my area are Oshkosh Corporation and Mercury Marine, and they employ about 1,000 engineers between the both of them, and they need it badly, just like everyone else needs it. So thank you.
Senator Path.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the Senator Petrowski and Representative Bourne's efforts here. I understand the need for more engineers. It does help the state overall. I guess my question is this, I guess it's a process question. Is this the process that we're going to start moving forward then when we need new buildings on campuses? May it be at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, or may it be at the University of Wisconsin-Madison? I guess that's more of a process question for you, Mr. Chairman, because I agree with the need for engineers. And I would plan to continue to advocate for the need for that. But again, I think this legislation sets a precedent that, I guess I'd like to know as a freshman member of the state Senate, if this is the direction we're going to go for future buildings within our four-year campuses or other state institutions. Thank you.
So the senator asked a question of me. I'm going to deflect to you guys here by asking you a question. We've done this before. This isn't out of the ordinary for the legislature to do what we are asking. In fact, we've done it, as you mentioned before, am I wrong, with other engineering programs at other universities. Representative Kennedy.
As far as the use of BTF, this is not unusual. I think usually historically it had been included in the capital budget. I remember prior budgets that BTF funding was included for a library at Green Bay by the legislature. I think that might have been then vetoed by the governor, but it's been done before by legislatures to include this. And I think the main reason that we didn't do it in the capital budget is we didn't discuss using any BTF in this capital budget this time. We did it last time, the governor removed some of it, so we just didn't even discuss it. And then further discussions since the capital budget was done with President Thompson and Chancellor Blank, they really highlighted the priority of this project, the amount of private fundraising that they're doing for it, and wanting to keep the strong support for it. They understood, even though they weren't happy about it, that we couldn't fit it in this time, but what can we do to continue to show support for this, that what we all agree we need. And so that's why we brought the bill forward this time. I mean, I think also, the senator's question is kind of like any senator can write any bill they want, and it'll get assigned to a committee, and rep can write any bill they want, and it'll get assigned to a committee, and then the houses will decide what they're going to move forward and what they're not. And so, I mean, I think there's a variety of ways that we can decide whether or not these are priorities. But it's not something that is brand new, and BTF funds have been designated by the legislature before to do planning and design for projects.
Thank you. That exhausts our list of committee members with questions. So I'll thank you both for being here and for testifying on this bill. And at this time, I'm going to invite our next individuals to testify. We have Ian Robertson, the Dean of the College of Engineering, and Jeff Rosanowski, UW-Madison alumni, testifying together in support of this bill. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. And I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. So Chairman Roth and members of the Senate Committee on Universities and Technical Colleges, my name is Ian Robertson. I'm the Granger Dean of the College of Engineering at UW-Madison. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee and testify today in support of Senate Bill 728, which would provide $1 million in building trust funds for planning and design of a new UW-Madison College of Engineering building. I'd also like to thank Senator Petrosky and Representative Bourne for authoring this bill. So building a new interdisciplinary engineering educational and research facility at UW-Madison will enable growth in the College of Engineering. It will allow us to increase the number of undergraduates from 4,500 to 5,500, which means that we will be able to accept more than 1 in 7 of the applications we receive. So that should just give you an idea of the student demand for getting a UW-Madison engineering degree. It is that high. Our College of Engineering alumni live and work in the 72 counties in Wisconsin. They are, and they will continue to be vital to the state's workforce and economic development needs. We hear from Wisconsin employers, Plexus, Oshkosh, Mercury Marine, Rockwell, Sub-Zero Wolf, Kohler. We could keep going on with that list, but you get the idea. They always tell us they want more engineers and they want UW-Madison engineers. In 2019, our engineering graduates had access to more than 12,000 job opportunities. We graduate about 1,000. The competition to hire one of our graduates is that intense. Our ranking as a top college attracts the best students and faculty. Of course, that ranking is predicated on educating engineering leaders and our research prowess. Our annual research expenditures exceed 100 million, and we generate about 100 patent disclosures annually as well. And from those patent disclosures, we spin out companies. However, attracting that top talent is competitive. At engineering colleges at Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan, Purdue, and elsewhere have been constructing new instructional and research facilities. They've been increasing opportunities for students to study engineering and hiring more faculty and staff. Our facilities, even with our aggressive renovation campaign, prohibit significant growth in the number of students in the faculty that we can educate. It's also limiting on what we can do in the research that we can do, and that impacts our ability to attract more companies to actually locate and stay in Wisconsin. The US is investing billions into research designed to reestablish our nation's leadership in critical technologies. And this is essential to the future economic growth and national security of our nation. This money will be directed towards the top engineering universities. Wisconsin's ability to secure this funding is closely tied to the new building. It will enable Wisconsin to lead in reestablishing our leadership in critical technologies and attract companies to the state. The project represents a 50-50 partnership with the state of Wisconsin. Pending campus and Board of Regents approval, we hope to come back to the legislator in the 23-25 state budget with a request for $300 million, $150 million in general fund supported borrowing, and $150 million in private funds. We look forward to partnering with the state to grow and meet the demands from the students and Wisconsin employers, and to continue to help drive innovation in our state. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time, and I encourage legislators to visit us on campus to learn more about the engineering program, about UW-Madison, and our plans for the new building. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, did you have comments you wanted to make before we went to questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may. Yes, good morning, and thank you, Chairman Roth and distinguished members of the committee for allowing me to speak. My name is Jeff Rosnowski of Wauwatosa, and I'm a proud alumnus of the UW-Madison College of Engineering, class of 1980. I come before you today to ask for your vote in favor of Senate Bill 728, which would use $1 million from the State Building Trust Fund for continued planning and design of the new engineering building at the UW-Madison campus. As a practical consideration, spending this additional money for planning for the proposed building makes sense because it's a logical extension of the $500,000 planning budget approved and spent from the 2019-2021 budget, and it aligns with the street utility work approved in the 2021-2023 state capital budget. But as we've heard, the reasons for approving this expenditure go much deeper. If you are a supporter of higher education, especially education in the high demand field of engineering, and if you recognize the value of the nation's 13th ranked engineering school, this new building, as we've heard, will allow enrollment to grow by 1,000 undergraduate and 440 graduate students. Currently, only 1 in 7 are admitted to the College of Engineering due to the lack of classroom space. If you support the economic value of creating high-paying jobs, the new building, as we've heard, will produce engineering graduates who receive on average 9 to 12 offers at annual salaries of $70,000 or more. And half of these graduates remain in the state of Wisconsin to work. If you recognize the competitive nature of engineering schools in the Big Ten, the new building will allow UW-Madison to keep pace with other Midwest campuses who have more recently expanded their engineering enrollments and modernized and expanded their classroom space with new buildings. And if you recognize the risks associated with substandard safety and deferred maintenance of the buildings in the College of Engineering, as you did with the Humanities building, the engineering building will address inadequate fire suppression and air handling systems. I have personally witnessed the explosive demand for engineers as a senior executive designing and constructing telecommunication networks throughout Wisconsin. I've also seen this as a Chamber of Commerce and other business associations board member, and as an alderman for the city of Wauwatosa, chairing the Community Development Committee. We can establish Wisconsin-based jobs, groundbreaking research, top-tier faculty, and dynamic innovation with your vote in favor of Senate Bill 728. As you can see, the potential rate of return for this project would more than justify the additional expenditures. Thank you for your thoughtful deliberation, for your service to the people of Wisconsin, and for the opportunity to testify in front of you today on Wisconsin.
Thank you. Can you, are you able to describe for the committee just this is really a lot of private funding is coming to the table for this. Are you able to walk us through what that looks like at all, or?
Yeah, I guess I should take that one, Jeff, unless you want to do it. So, I mean, we have been talking to our alumni, to corporations to get funds. We believe that we can raise the 150 million. We've already got good indications from many companies and many private individuals that they want to support. When we were talking to companies about the demand for engineering and would they support us in the last sort of go around when we asked for enumeration, they said yes, they would support. The second question to me was, how do we get our names in the building and how do we get more recognition in the building? Which they said, I assume that means that you'll be coming back and asking for some funds to help with the construction. I said, yes, once we get enumerated, once we get to raising the money, we will be back. You know, with the demand for Wisconsin engineers, companies are now engaging with us. They're engaging with the students as freshmen. Because the demand is that high, the competition is that high to get our students. So they are now working with our freshmen, staying connected with them throughout their entire 4 years at UW-Madison, because they want to put their company in front of them. So the companies are supportive. They will help with the support of the building. Our alumni, they've gone on to very successful careers. They attribute their success to their education at UW-Madison's College of Engineering, and they want to make sure others have the opportunities that they had to launch successful careers. So they will support the new building.
And as an alumnus sitting right here, Ian, you will get a check from me without a doubt.
Well, I asked the question because I think it's important to note that, you know, that in an instance like this, you've got that private sector coming to the table and recognizing the need too. I think it just shows just the importance that they value on this project. The Big Ten, which of which UW-Madison is a part, how do they compare with the number of engineering students? Are you aware in what would this bill passing, the allowing of more students, how would that work into that projection?
Yeah, so if we look at the sort of growth that Illinois, Michigan, Purdue, Ohio State, they've all grown significantly. So significantly, they've grown, say from when I was at Illinois, it was 5,000 students was the undergraduate enrollment. They're over 8,000 today.
Wow.
Michigan's also increasing. Ohio State is increasing. Texas, they're up 12 to 14,000 engineers. We are limited to 4,500 is our current number. So our lack of growth is challenging us. I mean, if you're looking to hire engineers and you can go to Illinois and Michigan and interview 3 or 4 times as many as coming here, do we then stay as a top recruitment school for those companies? And the answer is what we hear from companies is no. They're going to go where they can find the number of employees they want. It's not that we're not going to produce great engineers. We are. It's just their opportunities to hire are much better if they go to those other schools first, and then they would come to Wisconsin. We can't let that happen. Part of the reason that we attract Wisconsin's best to study engineering at Madison is because of that job market at the end. We are a top tier recruitment school today, and my job is to make sure we stay as that #1 recruitment school.
Does the design, let me just jump in here. Does the design of this building, is it going to take another building years from now to expand beyond the 50, was that everyone's time? Beyond the 5,500, or are we scalable here in another 10 years if we see that the need from the market is demanding even more engineers?
We are, with the current building, we would not be scalable above 5,500, maybe we could push to 6,000. If we want to go above that, we would need additional facilities. It's not just the actual space we need, it's the quality of space so that we can provide the education that's needed. Right, we need to have the research labs, we need to have the instructional labs with modern equipment in it. You've heard today about energy, clean energy technologies. We've heard about next generation communications. Our students need to be working with that kind of equipment when they're undergraduates with us so they can take that knowledge to companies. So we need the facilities that will allow us to do that. We don't have those facilities to go above those numbers I mentioned earlier.
With the new building though, we would still be somewhere around 6,000 top out, is that?
We will top out at 6,000 and even that will push our limits.
I'm going to turn to the committee now. Senator Larson, do you have a question? Senator Staffield, I know you were just coming from another hearing.
I'll think of something soon.
Okay. I'll go to Senator Fine.
You really asked the question I wanted, so thank you.
Okay, Senator Path.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And no, I have no questions. I just want to thank the two presenters for their work. I appreciate it.
Senator Darling.
Yes, thank you very much. And I thank the authors for putting this forward. And I guess the question was asked, where does this fit in with our building commission and their enumerations? And I think that we have to look at maybe doing a bit of a pause on our building commission to say, look, we've got to align the real world of work and its needs, and not just have numbers in the building commission. I think I'm very happy that Petrosky and Bourne have brought this forward because this could have died on that list waiting so long. So I thank you for that. But I think we have to look at how we enumerate projects and what that enumeration is based on. I think it has to be based on the real world of work and good paying jobs. I think we have to look at that as well. So thank you for bringing this bill forward.
Thank you, Senator Darling. And thank you both for testifying here today. I'm going to read off you are excused now. You can get away from the hot seat. I'll just list off the name of people who registered on this bill. We have Rachel Valverde from WMC registering in favor, Sabrina Stencil from the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation registering in favor. We have Tommy Thompson from UW System President registering in favor. Bill Monfrey representing himself, registering in favor. Jordan Lamb representing Bio Forward, registering in favor. Richard Antwine representing himself, registering in favor, and also Matt Cuso representing Badger Advocates, representing in favor. With that, we will move on to our next bill. Just give a moment here for the room to readjust. And now at this time, the committee will hear testimony on Senate Bill 517. And I'll ask Senator Wimberger and Representative Kitchens if they would like to come forward, which they are, and talk to us about their bill. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank
you. Well, thank you, Chairman Roth and committee members. 517 is about fixing a time gap with the various GI bills. You have a federal GI bill that covers 120 credits. Now, if you're like me, who's almost an old timer now, if it before 2013, your GI bill will expire after 15 years from your end of active service. Now it's forever, but nonetheless 120 credits. So you can have a time period. Let's say I decide to go get a PhD in 2023, 2022. My GI Bill would expire. And let's say also I was not a Wisconsin resident until I started that. Well, then I can get my credits but not complete the degree and kind of run out of my GI Bill. Or if there's a person who is going through their degree and
it doesn't, maybe takes a few social justice classes that they didn't like and expires on their credits. Well, then the Wisconsin GI Bill would pick up after that. So there's a pecking order. First, your federal GI Bill goes, and then once that runs out, the Wisconsin GI Bill will pick up in any scenario. So there's a theoretical dynamic in a few different ways in which someone might have their federal GI Bill expire, but still not have their degree. And in that circumstance, if they started their degree as not a Wisconsin resident, they wouldn't be eligible for the Wisconsin GI Bill for a 5-year period. So you could go to school for 3.5, 4 years, not have your degree done, but then have to basically take a year off school in order for the state benefits to pick up for you. As a result, maybe a veteran goes to a different state or takes some other arrangement. Then we lose that veteran in the job workforce. So this bill tries to shore up that gap, bringing the eligibility from 5 years to 3 years. That's kind of basically it.
Okay, I guess I'd like to add to that. I mean, there are two real purposes of this bill. The first, of course, is to do right by our veterans and to provide them these opportunities and sort of to pay them back for the service that they provided to us and to protect our democracy. But the second purpose is really to fulfill we have 130,000 jobs available in Wisconsin. A lot of it is geared towards filling that workforce shortage that we have with some very desirable people to come in. As the senator said, it lowers the requirement from 5 years down to 3 years, which we think makes sense because those, very often if people use up their federal GI Bill benefits and then they have to wait before they get the Wisconsin benefits. The other thing that it does is right now to get in-state tuition, you have to, your years that you spent in school don't count. So if you're, in school for 3 years and you're not a Wisconsin resident when you enter the service, those years don't count towards that 5 years. So we're going to change that so that those years do count, because we know that if these veterans get their education in Wisconsin and stay in Wisconsin, they're very, very likely to settle here permanently. There's another point I was going to make, and I slipped my mind. but that's basically the gist of it is again both to help our veterans and to address the workforce shortage that we currently have. I would also say that this bill did pass through the Assembly Colleges and Universities Committee unanimously. And yeah, I remember the other point I was going to make. There has been a proposal previously to eliminate the residency requirement completely for to get the Wisconsin GI Bill. We don't really think that's a good idea in that you would then attract people that have no real commitment to Wisconsin. This does require somewhat of a commitment to the state, so that I think it makes it very likely that they will settle here. And I think I'm not sure if UW is going to testify, but they did provide testimony and support, written testimony and support.
Well, thank you both. The question I had, I think you addressed, and that was how did you land at the 3 year for the residency requirement? And it sounds like you just wanted to make sure that there was a little buy-in and kind of sustainability here in Wisconsin. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. And plus it makes sense just because that's when the federal GI Bills would be expiring. So people wouldn't have to miss out on school before they, they wouldn't have to have a gap in their education.
Okay. I'm going to turn to the committee. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
Not at this time, thank you.
Senator Stafschel, did you have a question?
No, thanks.
Senator Fine, did you have a question? Senator Papp, did you have a question?
No question, thank you.
Senator Darling, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
We are that good at explaining.
Thank you. This time I want to invite an individual who almost needs no introduction because he's testified so much in the last few days. Paul Fisk of the American Legion, if you would come forward at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and if you would not object, I have submitted remarks on both 517 and SB 605, but I'd like to combine my
Absolutely.
remarks if you don't object, because they are so related.
Absolutely.
I've been a member of the Council of Veterans Programs for a number of years. And a few years ago, we went through the report on veterans benefits. And we identified this 5-year waiting period as a impediment to attracting veterans to Wisconsin. So the American Legion is glad to see something's being done. At the council, our position without anything was eliminated. It's an impediment. This is a good middle ground. It's an improvement. But the Wisconsin economy, as has been mentioned, is looking for skilled employees. One place to get them throughout the world is the veteran community, especially when they're being discharged. That means Wisconsin has to be attractive. This, along with other legislation that or policy changes that have been made this year, improves the attractiveness of Wisconsin. It is hoped that each one of these tools will continue to improve that attractiveness and allow employers to go out to military, naval stations, military bases, etc., to recruit and bring back to Wisconsin. Now, in my case, a long time ago, I brought my family back to Wisconsin because I was going to be going back to sea. Eventually, I came back and I was able to convert right into a job that I did in the military. I operated the power plant up at Fort. There came a time when the employer decided to hold the job I had at the time as shift supervisor, that you're going to have a degree. And you're going to get it in 2 years. Well, I ended up going to a different, being asked to go to a different position before that happened. But it's the reality out there among many industries, as you advance in the industry, the skills need not only refreshing, you need new skills. This helps make that financially possible, both of these bills. In 605, I talked to the author because there's a word in section 2, and it's in my testimony, on defining a relocated veteran. So based on my naval experience, I had to ask the author a question. What if you are assigned to Wisconsin as a Wisconsin resident, as a recruit? You do your 3 years, but you don't relocate to another state. I don't know how common it is in the other services, but in the Navy, you could be assigned to a ship that is home ported in Rota, Spain, Yokosuka, Japan. You could go to Massawa Naval Air Station, Sigonella, Sicily, Naval Station in Naples. You're not attached or residing in any state. Those are all accompanied tours. You take your family with you. But if you were a senior petty officer or a mid-grade officer, you've got children, presumably in the age of going to higher education. How does that bill affect that? Because of that word state. And it's just a question that I noticed and threw out just because of the unique circumstance, because a friend of mine's daughter married a Navy dentist. They were stationed in Naval Station Guam. They did 3 years there. Then they came back here on leave en route to Sigonella in Sicily. So when they come back, I think they are back now over at Michigan. furthering education. But there was about 6 years there, they didn't see the country. So it's something to remember. I don't know whether it's not a deal killer on this bill. It's too good a bill. But is it an issue or is it not? I don't know. But I'd like to thank the authors and the committee for hearing it, the authors for putting it together. And you combine it with the other policy changes that we have, that you have made in Wisconsin in this legislature. And some we hope to finish in this legislature. You are slowly but surely making Wisconsin a more attractive place to come back to or to relocate to upon the completion of your service.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I made a note of your question. I'll ask the authors when they testify in that bill just to see their thoughts.
And I did speak with Representative Edmund this morning.
Okay. And that is something we'll look at that, the committee will look at that in our process that we would go through in an executive session. There would be an opportunity if we felt it necessary to make an amendment to that. I'm going to turn to the committee. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
Not at this time, thanks.
Yeah, actually, so how do we address, isn't there a privacy issue with addressing, so the military can't just give the legislature or the state a list of people who are ending their service? Do we just need to be, when you say we can add this attractiveness, we add it and they come to us, is that the process?
What in the last administration, they were attempting to do, and I know it cost a bunch of money, is they were sending people out from the state to recruit. I am saying Wisconsin industry. There's nothing that prevents them from going, let's make it easy, down the Great Lakes where there's sailors separating all the time. And opening up a line of communication. There's also a line of communication, they're doing it in San Diego all the time, they're doing it in Norfolk all the time. But if industry wouldn't cost the state anything. The industry knows what they're looking for in skills. And with something like this in a whole package that you've been working, those members of industry, if they are educated on what you've been doing, can make the presentation to sell Wisconsin. We don't need the state agencies going to sell Wisconsin, because what happens if somebody comes back and there is a relationship with an employer? I was lucky. I came back and they just built the power plant at Fort. In fact, the second unit wasn't even commissioned. That's what I did in the nation. That's what everybody that worked up there did. I was lucky in that respect, but I had to walk in, and once they saw my DD 214, it was in to get an interview. Well, you have, as the testimony on the last bill pointed out, you have industry coming to the school, to Wisconsin, to recruit out of the engineering school and other schools. So there's nothing wrong with, or it shouldn't be an impediment for industry, especially the larger industry, or somebody like even WMC or the chain, to go to these places and recruit. They're the ones that want the people, and the ones that need the people. They know the skills they need. And all we're doing is putting a package together that they can sell. And at the same time, given time, improve the economy of Wisconsin. Yesterday, I testified on a bill on hospital corn coming to Wisconsin. Heroes for Health. It's not Wisconsin that's going out there and recruit those medical people. They're coming back and they're going to get in touch with healthcare providers, and we're providing the tool for them to get credit for their skills. But it's industry recruiting, not the state recruiting.
Thank you. Senator Fine?
No, thank you, thank you.
Senator Path,
No questions at this time. Thank you. Very interesting testimony.
Senator Darling, thank you. I appreciate that we've kept you busy. I know the legislature the last few days. Paul, will you rest up and have a good Christmas, okay?
I will definitely have a good Christmas, and I'll be back next year, if not before.
Thank you. At this time, the committee would like to welcome Rick Sense, a good friend of the Northeast of Wisconsin, representing the Greater Green Bay Chamber of Commerce, to testify in favor. It's good to see you again, Rick.
Chairman Roth, always good to see you. Thank you. May I speak about Senator Staffel's last question?
Absolutely.
Having worked in my previous life for 2 members of Congress, that was an issue actually that I actually spent a considerable amount of time on. Sorry, I'm gonna lose this thing. I can hear myself. There's a list the state has received in the past. The list, unfortunately, is updated to the point of where men and women that are leaving the service, where they actually entered from, doesn't take into account the list, didn't, at least at that time, did not take into account where they were planning to move back to or go back to. So there's some work that really needs to be done there from my time in the halls of Congress. Now I'm a little past that point at this point, so things might have changed, but it is something you might want to coordinate with your member of Congress on too.
Well, and the reason I asked that question is to be clear is when I was in the assembly, we had some mental health study committees, and one of the issues we had was veteran suicide rates and mental health, and trying to get them tools that they could use. And there was a privacy barrier. I remember that you couldn't just get a list of those folks that were being discharged. So I took notes on my stuff.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Chairman, for indulging me in the opportunity to answer that. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Chairman Roth, members of the committee, thank you for your time this morning and attention. I just have some prepared remarks, and certainly I'll be willing to try and answer any questions that you might have. So if you walk through any Green Bay's downtown area or drive through our industrial parks, you're more than likely going to see help wanted sign. They're everywhere. And it's not a sign that you see just in Green Bay and the greater Green Bay area, northeast Wisconsin, or the state of Wisconsin. It's a nationwide issue that we are dealing with. There is a real struggle right now in our country to find workers. However, this is, like I said, just not a Wisconsin phenomenon. At the Greater Green Bay Chamber, we have been working to address this situation. We have established multiple strategies to combat this problem and to attract talent to our area from areas other than northeast Wisconsin. One area where we have seen success with this approach has been within the veteran community. Working with organizations like Green Bay's Mission Wisconsin. Mission Wisconsin is an organization that's what they do. They travel the world, visiting military installations, visiting with men and women that are about to leave the service to promote coming to Wisconsin to live. If you haven't had a chance to talk with Steve Yankee, the CEO of Mission Wisconsin, I would strongly encourage you to do so. And I've partnered with him on some other issues in addition to this one in the past as well. There is an opportunity there in the veterans community, as the previous speaker mentioned as well. The veterans that are out there are workers that have the needed skills that we're looking for here in Wisconsin, and can be applied to products that are being manufactured, developed, and produced already here in Wisconsin in the business community. Wisconsin is indeed veteran ready. However, despite being veteran ready, Wisconsin has an opportunity to do more to attract the brave men and women that have served our country. The Greater Green Bay Chamber, along with organizations again like Mission Wisconsin, applaud the lead author, Senator Wimberger, and Representative Kitchens in the Assembly, and many other sponsors and co-sponsors of this legislation, looking to improve the Wisconsin GI Bill. By modifying the 5-year requirement to 3 years, this bill will ensure that a student's education is not interrupted. Additionally, by eliminating the provision that a student must be a Wisconsin resident at the time of entry into active duty as a condition of eligibility for the non-resident tuition exemption for veterans, those that serve will be able to qualify for in-state tuition when they enroll in a UW system institution. These changes will make Wisconsin a much more attractive destination point for veterans to pursue educational opportunities, raise a family, start a career, and as a result, help alleviate Wisconsin's workforce shortage. Wisconsin GI Bill is the best educational tool, educational benefit in the country for veterans and their families. Aligning the residency requirements with other traditional residency requirements is a great move for talent attraction for the following reasons. The economic impact of the veterans population just from the federal dollars coming into the state is near $1 billion annually. Keeping the provision that federal educational benefits must be exhausted before using the state's benefits allows for our post-secondary schools to capitalize on those service members with existing benefits while not penalizing them for using those benefits during their service. It also allows us to better attract families to the state prior to starting post-secondary education. With 200,000 to 250,000 transitioning service members and their families transitioning every year, attracting the service member and family to live and work here while providing for their family's educational needs in our public and private post-secondary system is truly a win for Wisconsin. Thank you for your attention.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I don't have a question outside of saying, I know how important the veteran community is in Northeast Wisconsin. I know how many employers strive to hire veterans just because they recognize the intangible benefits that they bring through their military service. So I would agree with you, anything that we can do to encourage them to settle here after their service, to work in those businesses that are looking for help right now would be an important thing. I'm going to turn to the committee. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
Not at this time. Thank you for coming to testify.
Senator Stashow?
No, thanks.
Senator Fine?
Good to see you again.
Senator Path?
I just want to say it's good to see Rick Sense as well. I hope you're doing well, sir. And thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator. Always good to talk with you.
And Senator Darling? Rick, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. At this time, I'm going to read those registering on the bill. We have Deej Lundgren with the with UW System registering for informational purposes only. Joe Rasmussen from UW-Madison registering in favor, and Rolf Wengenke from WACU registering in favor. That concludes testimony on Senate Bill 517. At this time, the committee is going to wait a second here for a readjustment here of individuals. At this time, the committee now will hear testimony on Senate Bill 605, and I would invite Representative Edmond to come forward. And I believe Senator Koenig has a staff. I apologize, your name. Nick. I could have looked right on my computer screen. This is technology too, but we have Nick Burris with Senator Koenig's office here to testify as well. I will turn the floor over to you, gentlemen. Thank you for being here today.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for holding the public hearing today and giving me the opportunity to speak to you in support of Senate Bill SB 605. I would like to thank Senator Koyonga for helping me to work with him on this important legislation. Those who serve in the military and their families make great sacrifices for our state and nation. One of the challenges faced by service members and their families is being required to relocate to a new post. Unfortunately, if the spouse or parent of a student at one of our state's public technical colleges or university is relocated outside of the state of Wisconsin due to their military services, it may cause a student to lose their state residency. This would result in the student being required to pay non-resident tuition, or even through the student, even though the student was treated as a resident prior to the relocation. SB 605 corrects this problem by allowing relocated service members, their spouses and dependents to be considered residents, which permits them to pay in-state tuition at a UW System University and Wisconsin Technical College, even if they can demonstrate that they are bona fide residents during the relocation period. In addition, if dependents are to make this demonstration They will continue to be considered residents of the state after the relocation period has ended. This will help in situations such as when a military parent retires from the military service to another state outside of Wisconsin. This bill is another way we can say thank you to the service members and their families by making college more affordable for them. Also, by encouraging our service members and their families to attend college in Wisconsin. It increases the likelihood that they will stay in our state and become part of our workforce after they complete their education. Mr. Chairman and members, I ask for your support of this legislation and thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there were already questions on this, so if you permit, I'll just read Senator Coin's testimony and then try to answer them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for holding a hearing on Senate Bill 605. This legislation allows relocated service members, their spouses, and dependents to be considered residents of Wisconsin for the purposes of paying in-state tuition at a public university or technical college in our state. If a student at a public university or technical college has a parent who is relocated outside of the state of Wisconsin in the course of their military service, that student then loses state residency status and is forced to pay non-resident tuition, regardless of if the student was treated as a resident prior to the relocation. Military members and their families provide a tremendous benefit to our state and often face unexpected hurdles as a result of their sacrifice to our country. Wisconsin should eliminate those hurdles by making college more affordable for military members and their families. This bill corrects a problem brought to our attention by a student's unexpected out-of-state tuition bill. Senate Bill 605 allows military members, their spouses, and dependents to be considered residents, allowing them to pay in-state tuition at UW System and UW Technical College schools. The applicant must demonstrate they are bona fide residents during the relocation period via tax return filings, voter or vehicle registrations, employment, physical residence, Wisconsin operator's license, self-support, involvement in community activities, or physical presence in state for at least 12 months prior to the start of the semester. Senate Bill 605 does not allow resident tuition for a student who enters and remains in the state solely to obtain an education. Senator Darling and I did confirm with UW System that this language gives universities the flexibility, but does not mandate, allowing the institutions to determine bona fide residency. Passage of this bill would affirm Wisconsin's commitment to our military families and easing the burdens their service may cause. This legislation has bipartisan support and will provide significant relief to the impediments that military families have encountered when a service member is relocated. Thank you for hearing Senate Bill 605, and I respectfully ask for your support.
Thank you. I guess the question I have, I'm going to ask on behalf of Paul Fisk. I believe he spoke maybe with both offices or just with yours, Representative Edmund, in his related to a definition of a relocated veteran. Is there any merit to what he's saying to the question that he had regarding that?
Yes, if I can go for it. Let's just say that I'm in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm stationed in Hawaii. The wife is still living in Wisconsin, and I'm living in Wisconsin. I've completed 2 years at the University of Wisconsin. With this bill, even though I don't find the dad or the kid now. But my dad got transferred and I'm still going to school in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to pay out of state tuition, and I don't want credits that I'm taking in Wisconsin to not be transferred to wherever he was stationed at. Is a simplified way of saying that. So once as long as dad was a resident of Wisconsin, and I'm a resident of Wisconsin, because he has no idea where he's going to get transferred to next.
Mm-hmm.
And this and we've proven that if we can educate people here, they're probably going to stay here and live here and pay taxes here and make Wisconsin their home.
So to surmise, the you don't believe it's necessary to amend that language at all? Is that correct? The bill?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I am still waiting back to hear from legislative council.
Well, let us
It's-
know, yeah, when you
Yeah.
work that through, it'd be, obviously, that's an easy thing that we could do, but.
Right, and it's very tricky, especially when you're dealing with like sailors in the Navy, because
Mhm.
you're on ships around the world. As you can, you know, in the Air Force, you're stationed on the ground, in the Army, you're stationed
Right.
on a base in the ground, or on ground. It's a little bit harder with the Navy, but we are looking into it.
Okay. I'm gonna turn to the committee. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Senator Stafschel? Senator Royce?
No, thank you.
Senator Path?
No questions, thank you.
Senator Darling?
Yes, I do. I do, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for bringing this bill forward. In Milwaukee, we have a huge constituency of veterans who have skills that they could offer to our state. And it was suggested that this change be made, but also that there be like a one-stop shop for vets within UWM and other universities, so that the vets could go there, get their skills assessed, and then figure out the path that they want to take. And I think if we coordinate these efforts with this change that we're proposing today, we could have more veterans come, more veterans assess their skills and abilities, and more services to help them stay in Wisconsin. So I hope this could become a part of a broader package. But I want to thank the authors for bringing this forward today.
Thank you for your comments, Senator. And with that, I will thank you both. And excuse
Thank
you.
you.
At this time, I will read the registrations. We have registering for informational purposes only, Jeeves Lundgren with the UW system. Also registering for information only, Crystal Potts from UW Madison. And that exhausts the list of those testifying. Thank you, Representative, in those registering. We have just a few more bills left before us, but before we do that, the committee is just going to take a short recess, a short 5-minute recess. And we'll be back in a moment. Okay. What's that? No. Okay. Spouses there, spouse. Early. Is this actually? We have one. There's like a handful. Unique. And so the parent didn't, in those circumstances, the parent didn't enter the service from Wisconsin. Right, that's all right. All right.
Right. Who would brought those questions? It's one of only two bills. In the whole budget that is the NRF specified again. Right, we're good. I'm sure. Thanks, Tony.
Jason, do you want this cookie?
Thank you.
I would bring up 2 cookies to each of these in case people are in need.
See you 30 minutes pass out.
Yeah, I'd be like, excuse me, we need a sugar bump.
You have a slaughter in that.
Yeah.
I didn't catch you. Okay. Yeah. But I think, yes, but I don't think it's helpful. Yeah, you gotta get a chance first.
Yeah, well, at that point, I've been told they were dehydrated.
Right now. Sometimes.
What's your favorite committee staff?
You're not
gonna have a favorite. Which one's that?
That's a lesson learned.
Mine is not.
Which one do you find the most interesting? Yeah. I signed up for that. And I thought it was wireless. Maybe that would identify how much licensing issue they're gonna be.
Whenever I.
What's that? That's why I like you guys, you're not good.
Streaming live from Dark Hallway.
You couldn't cancel our hearing last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yes.
But
This must be from.
quite a few committees going on today, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm technically in 3 of them at the same time.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah. Actually, I was supposed to be in 4 o'clock, I decided not, canceled one, so we're down to 3 today.
Video is still on. Video is no audio.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring you. I understand all of these issues are easy for what it's together, so it's not really long term. It's like, here I am.
The Senate Committee on Insurance and Technology, I'm sorry, Senate Committee on Insurance. Where am I?
That's where I was before.
That's where you were before.
I'm here now.
You're like, what? The Senate Committee on Universities and Technologies is back in session. And apologize just for that short recess, but ready to finish up. We are going to hear now testimony on Senate Bill 742, 744, and 745. It is the author of those bills. I'm going to step away and testify and ask Senator Stafshold if he would come up and chair the committee at this time.
Go ahead, Senator Roth.
Thank you, Senator Stafshold and committee members. Some who have been here and others who are online here with us today. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to testify, as I mentioned, on all three of those bills at once, just because I think that there's a lot of correlation there, and I think we'll have that for anyone else, the ability to do that as well. My testimony is a little bit at length, but I just think it's important to be able to lay out a little bit, which requires a little longer explanation. So thank you, committee members, for your time and for your attention today. As you know, in October, this committee held an informational hearing on international security in institutions of higher education. I called on experts in the field to present their findings to this committee. We learned that American academic institutions are under attack from outside forces. Academic research and intellectual property are being stolen from bad actors working on behalf of adversarial governments who have worked their way into our university systems. The experts who testified offered us recommendations to increase security in order to protect sensitive research, intellectual property in the campus community. Following up on their recommendations, as well as considering issues raised by committee members, I began drafting legislation to advance security measures in the University of Wisconsin system. Let me be clear. The threats facing our universities today cannot be taken lightly. Foreign adversaries are exploiting the openness and collaboration on university campuses to illegally obtain academic research to advance their own scientific, economic, and military objectives. In a 2019 report, the FBI warned that if a university's research has technical applications, it should be expected that foreign adversaries will target it. American universities, including the University of Wisconsin, are world-renowned for innovation in scientific and technological discoveries. Because of that reputation, universities across the nation have become soft targets for those who wish to exploit their openness and do them harm. In particular, the FBI notes that the Chinese government has historically sponsored economic espionage and is the world's principal infringer of intellectual property theft. The chief executive for the FBI Boston Field Office, Joseph Bonatolova, said, "No country poses a greater, more severe or long-term threat to our national security and economic prosperity than China. China's communist government's goal, simply put, is to replace the US as the world superpower, and they are breaking the law to get there." The FBI, other agencies, and experts in the field have warned universities about espionage and made recommendations to tighten security. By and large, universities and governments have been slow to respond. The need to take action now is critical. Alex Joske, a former analyst with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's International Cyber Policy Center, has issued reports focusing on the Chinese military and the influence of the Communist Party of China overseas. Josky warns of China's People's Liberation Army expanding research collaboration with universities outside of China, and in some cases, PLA scientists obscuring their military affiliation in order to gain access in areas such as hypersonic missiles and navigation technology. An estimated 2,500 scientists and engineers have been selected by the Chinese military to study and work abroad in this last decade. Josky further stated, while universities haven't self-regulated on this issue and haven't controlled their associated security risks, universities and researchers will not effectively limit the risk of PLA collaboration on their own until governments develop clear policies on it. The CCP uses more than 200 distinct talent recruitment programs to gain a foothold in foreign universities to obtain technology and information, and are often associated with property theft and espionage. American universities are the main target, having been described by Chinese state media as the largest treasure trove of technological talent. China's talent recruitment programs engage in rewarding economic espionage, and their widespread misconduct, even to the extent of being directly carried out by the Chinese military, sets them apart from other nations. Many of the valuable contributions to the university system are the result of partnerships with international students, faculty, and researchers. Over 4,000 international students from more than 120 countries study at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which places the university among the top 15 universities in the United States with the largest number of international students. Students from mainland China compose the largest group of international students at UW-Madison, 3,200 in 2019. Wisconsin has one of the world's best research universities because of the contribution of international students and scholars. Necessary reforms should not discourage international endeavors, but must ensure that appropriate safeguards prevent legitimate threats from adversarial governments interfering with the important work conducted by our universities. Before us today are 3 bills that can further protect the UW system from existing threats. One are the first, prohibiting members of the PLA from admission or employment with the university within the university system. Second, eliminating recruitment and propaganda programs. Third, and further protecting valuable research from theft by adversarial governments. So first, let's look at Senate Bill 742, prohibiting the admission or employment of PLA members in the UW system. Is documented in numerous instances. Universities often do not fully vet the applicants from international institutions for their military affiliations. Meanwhile, the Chinese military has sponsored an immense number of PLA scientists to travel internationally for the purpose of acquiring advanced research and returning that information to mainland China for use by the CCP. Their military scientists disguise themselves as researchers looking to simply engage in civilian collaboration. The US is their top target. This theft poses immense economic and national security concerns, with stolen research leading to advances in nuclear ICBM technology documented as early as 1999 in annual losses of up to $600 billion. For example, in 2020, the US Department of Justice filed charges against Yanguing Yi, a member of the PLA, who lied on her J-1 visa application to attend Boston University. During her time in the US, Ye conducted research on US military projects in robotics and computer science, and partnered with other PLA officials on risk assessment model designed to decipher data for military applications. In fact, PLA members embedded in US institutions have been repeatedly charged with crimes relating to IP and research theft that put US national security interests at a disadvantage. Wisconsin should make clear that military members from adversarial nations have no place in our higher ed system. SB 742 addresses this risk by prohibiting PLA members from all UW system campuses. Next, Senate Bill 744 prohibits the CCP's use of propaganda initiatives in Wisconsin institutions such as Confucius Institutes and Thousand Talents programs, which have proven problematic in the form of talent recruitment, propaganda, and espionage activities. This legislation also requires UW employees currently participating in a CCP talent recruitment program to disclose that information and end further participation in those programs. In November 2004, the People's Republic of China established the first Confucius Institute in Seoul, South Korea, and made its way to the United States at the University of Maryland later that same month. This was the first domestic Confucius Institute established in the United States under the guidance of the Hanban, a government entity of the PRC overseen by the State Ministry of Education. These entities were quickly dispersed across the globe under the auspice of making Chinese language and culture teaching resources and services available around the world. Here in Wisconsin, UW-Platteville hosted a Confucius Institute on its campus from 2008 until 2021. Over the years, CFIs have received increased scrutiny due to the opaqueness of their operations, a lack of host institutional controls, concerns on propaganda efforts, restrictions on free speech, espionage allegations, and research concerns. Despite 90 of the 118 CFIs in the US closing, universities are still continuing their partnerships with CCP groups through rebranding initiatives. The University of Wisconsin-Platteville has indicated that it will continue its partnership with the PRC in spite of closure of its CFI. Talent recruitment programs like the Thousand Talents program are used by the CCP both to recruit ethnic Chinese nationals as well as non-ethnic Chinese researchers in key industries. Many recruits may not be directly involved in researching classified or military materials, but may be engaged in what is considered dual-use technological research. In one example, Dr. Charles Lieber of Harvard was paid roughly $1.5 million as part of the TTP and was recently charged by the US Department of Justice for refusing to disclose this information as part of his federal research grant application. Here in Wisconsin, Zhao Hua was charged with theft during his participation with the TTP. In 2013, while serving as a researcher at the Medical College of Wisconsin, Zhao stole several vials of cancer research compound in hundreds of research files to bring back to Zhejiang University. Currently, participation in the CCP talent programs is not illegal. Participation in talent programs can lead to monetary stipends for researchers, but coercion has also been used by the CCP to gain cooperation. As documented in a recent ProPublica article, the CCP's reach into American campuses extends as far as threatening Chinese nationals residing in the US for conduct performed or not performed abroad. Talent recruitment efforts are critical to the CCP as the party views technological development as fundamental to its ambitions. Its goal isn't to achieve parity with other countries, but dominance in primacy, according to Alex Josky. SB 744 provides 3 clear initiatives. First, UW system schools may not host CFIs or its future iterations and must end any existing contracts with these groups, ending a key foothold for the CCP on US campuses. Second, UW system schools may not participate in cultural exchange efforts identified by the US State Department as Chinese Communist Party propaganda tools. And third, UW system researchers, employees, and students may not participate in CCP-sponsored talent programs. As a part of this effort, acknowledging the suggestions raised by those in our informational hearing on the matter, this bill provides a 6-month period for participants to disclose and end that participation. Finally, Senate Bill 745 requires additional protections to ensure the security of taxpayer-funded research projects. This language codifies and enhances federal gift disclosure requirements and requires researchers to disclose the contracts with foreign countries of concern. The US government provides $139 billion in federal research funding annually. Under this effort, individual grant awarding agencies are tasked with ensuring compliance with certain federal statutes and institutional disclosure requirements, particularly those related to foreign support, disclosure, and research protections. As we heard in the informational hearing, certain university foreign gift disclosure requirements are rarely enforced or reported on. $6.5 billion in unreported foreign gifts were disclosed when the former administration first announced its intent to enforce this requirement. These gifts can be used to influence and compromise the behavior of universities. SB 745 seeks to codify and modernize federal disclosure requirements in state law, lowering the existing gift reporting thresholds under federal code and requiring the disclosure of anonymous or in-kind foreign gifts. SB 745 also requires that any employee contract with certain nations of concern, including China, Russia, and North Korea, be disclosed to the UW school. Researcher contracts with countries of concern should be disclosed to the university so that it can determine appropriate protections and security for those projects. Lastly, SB 745 requires that UW institutions ensure that research performed at its institutions funded by taxpayer dollars conform to the requirements of the grant awarding entity and codifies in statute that the UW system adopt research protection standards that conform with industry best practices. Adopting all of these measures is imperative to the security of our world-renowned university, state of Wisconsin, and our nation. Committee members, I have assembled a draft report that I will share with you today. It summarizes the testimony and recommendations from the informational hearing. The report, in greater detail than my testimony, provides the rationale for proposing these bills. It also provides the intent for the committee to recommend these bills for passage. I urge you to examine the report and its legislation, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator Roth. Any questions from committee? Senator Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. The first question that arises to me, and I've got a couple. The first question that pops in my head is, isn't this the state wandering into a territory that, frankly, the CIA should be leading? Meaning that a lot of this stuff, if there is an coordinated effort to try and extract information, extract students, and to co-opt research, that would be, I feel like, there's no foreign, there's not really an aspect of the state government that's coordinated to try and be able to do that within our borders. That's something that's the national government, right? That the CIA should be doing. So isn't this, a lot of these things, out of the scope of what the state should be doing, and something that should be nudged over to an agency that is more well-versed in dealing with them?
Well, first I would say, and thank you for the question. I think rather than the CIA, it's probably the U.S. Department of State, which is most connected with this. They are the ones that initially would approve visa applications for international students, including those from China coming to study in the United States. But I think what we learned in that hearing that we had back in October is that there is a concerted effort by probably a number of adversarial nations, but specifically China, to use our institutions of higher learning to their advantage in the openness that we have in the United States. And that's why, is myself a United States citizen, I think it's important to me, it's important to the state of Wisconsin, it's important to the United States that we increase our security protocols in our awareness of the real threat that we're under from the CCP. And I think these three bills help address that. I don't believe they put any undue burdens. I believe they just awaken us to the reality that exists right now in 2021. And to that end, I don't fault any of our institutions of higher learning for things that have happened in the past per se, because I think we were all initially caught off guard. I was, when we had this testimony in October, to the reality that we're facing right now. It's one of the reasons why, when it comes to research grants in particular, we allow that 6-month window in there for researchers to wind down contracts that they might have had and we don't want to, our goal isn't to punish anybody, it's just to say, look, the world that exists right now, we're facing increased threats from the CCP. They want access to our technology in the fantastic research that is being provided by the research institutions here in Wisconsin. And I think that we as a legislature have to recognize that there's a reason these adversaries want it. These are soft targets. These aren't hardened, I've been to, maybe you have been to secure institutions. I know that there's security here, but not hardened security like you would see at other places. It's imperative, I think, that today we begin the process of recognizing the threat we face from the CCP in adjusting our practices on security protocols here with some of these foreign students and relationships with these international organizations to help address that understanding.
Senator Larson, follow-up question?
Yeah, if I may, and I have another one that's a little bit different, and I can wait till there's a round around the committee because I'm sure other people have questions too. But on that, specifically on Senate Bill 745, you're leaving it to the institutions to try and be able to develop how to weed out members of the PLA. And I'm just curious, I can't imagine that there's folks who are putting that on an application or walking around in a military uniform on campus, and we can, folks can jump out and say, we got one right there, so I appreciate the effort to try and, make sure that we're not turning over intelligence over to a foreign adversary, but, I get that the legislation leaves it up to the institution, but is there any ideas that we're going to put their way, or are we just leaving it to the universities to try and figure out how to weed out who is and isn't a member of the PLA?
Yeah, I'm not here to say that the university on its own is going to be the determining factor here. I just think that I think having a question on an application from a foreign national seeking to do either research or be a student, enrolled in a student in Wisconsin, to have on their application, if they are a member of the PLA, to have on their application a question asking if they are a member or have ever had affiliation with some of these military civil organizations like the Thousand Talents program. I think those are important things to have on there. I know that, could they lie? Absolutely. But the fact that they go on there, that allows us the ability to work with the Department of State and catch them in a lie. I think the fact that if we could find that they lied on an application, it really almost instantaneously lets us know that the person we're dealing with is a nefarious actor.
Senator Royce.
Sorry, just real quick on that. Isn't there technically a military requirement for members of the Chinese citizens to have military service? So wouldn't this end up having the effect of every Chinese citizen coming to the US technically being a member of the PLA and therefore ineligible to attend in the university?
I don't believe that China has a universal military requirement.
Okay.
Moving forward, Senator Royce, any questions?
No, thank you.
Senator Pine?
No, thank you.
Senator Path?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is this: is the legislation is focused on nation states like the People's Republic of China, Russia, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, or Syria, but it's not focused on individuals? It's focused on nation states?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, you're saying, well, I guess what I would say, tell me if this is answering what your question is. I think it's definitely focused on individuals, foreign nationals coming from those countries of interest, countries of concern.
Thank you. And I was also, when it comes to the research projects and research dollars that donors, there could be individual donors from those given countries. So I was just seeking some clarity, and I thank you for that. And then my question is, I guess for you, Mr. Chairman, will we be hearing from the UW system on this bill today?
Yes, we will.
All right, thank you very much.
Senator Darling. Hearing no questions, Senator Darling, I think we're ready to move forward.
Sorry if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just, I mean, just one of the things to step back and away from is the increase in hate crimes, specifically against our Asian American and Pacific Islander neighbors, that there was just, there was a report that just came out of New York Police Department showing an increase of 361% increase in anti-Asian hate crimes over the last year. And we've seen corresponding increases also in Wisconsin. Is there, what effort can be made if this legislation is moving forward to make sure that it doesn't lead to that increase, to exacerbate that, and to just increase, I don't know, xenophobic behavior, to be able to target individuals just based off of, their country of origin or frankly, how they look?
Senator, I appreciate that question, and I'm glad that you asked it. In my testimony, before going into those bills, I laid out just how important of a component international students and researchers are to what we do here in Wisconsin. And I don't think anyone will discount that or discredit that. And I think it's important as we move forward that we recognize that we're not talking about, and it's, I think, incumbent on me, it's incumbent on everyone, which is why I included that in there. We're not talking about, or these bills are addressing the behavior of an adversarial government, not its people, it's government. And by extension, people associated to that government through connections with the PLA and in other civil military fusion entities that we've discussed. But it's important to recognize that the contributions that Asian Americans have made, not only to in many different facets of our country, but certainly when it comes to research and development of our institutions. When I think of you mentioned hate crimes. If you had a chance, I'm going to send it out to all committee members in case maybe you didn't see it, but ProPublica put out a piece recently. And they talked about, you want to talk about a hate crime. There was a member, a Chinese national at Purdue University who just put out on social media, I would call it innocent, but he just put out a tweet supporting what happened, the pro-democracy folks recognizing what happened in the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And almost immediately, he had national security spy from the Chinese spy agency show up at his parents' house, threatening them. His parents are back in China, threatening them on their safety and the safety of their son, because he dared in the United States to offer an opinion on the fundamental freedoms and rights of Chinese people. The CCP, if you read this article, they have at the institutions of higher learning in the United States spies who are spying on other Chinese nationals to make sure that they conform, to make sure that they don't dare breathe any ideas of these liberal values and rights that we have long espoused in our country. And I worry about that. And I worry about those Chinese nationals. I think it's important, the work that we're doing here. Yes, we've got to recognize that The threat here is from governments and the people connected to them, not the populations in mass, and we will always be supportive. I will in this committee. The foreign nationals and the immigrant community and all that they've done to advance our country and its ideals.
I appreciate that. I would just think that we need to do a little bit extra, considering that you know, each individual person's beliefs and you know, the heart and soul of the university, trying to recruit and retain students from outside of our borders, both Wisconsin and the country, is good and admirable. But on the individual basis, a lot of rhetoric gets shorthanded and is used as a bludgeon, is used as an excuse to alienate and to treat folks as another. You know, obviously the behavior of the Chinese Communist Party doesn't is bad. It's worse, but in no way does it excuse the real and persistent problems of racism and hate crimes that are on the rise right here within our own borders. You know, just because we're not as bad, we're not censoring Peng Shui here. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are that we don't have work to do. So, you know, as these pieces of legislation are moving forward, I think there might be more that we want to be doing in that department as well. And as you're thinking a great deal about this, and it's clear that you are, I'd be very interested in partnering with you on trying to be able to do something to help prevent that individual aspect of it that is very real to our neighbors who are of AAPI descent.
I appreciate those concerns, Senator, and absolutely look forward to working with you on that component.
Okay, seeing no further questions, up next, we have Jeff Brandt and Tom Dempke from UW.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here today. How we're going to set this up is I'll provide some testimony and then we'll answer questions. Tom here is a little more of an issue area expert on visas and things like that, so he can jump in and help us if you have some questions on some of that. So, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for providing the UW system an opportunity to speak to you today regarding the package of bills put forth by the chairman to curb foreign influence in higher education. UW system takes its role in curbing foreign influences on our campuses very seriously. Undue foreign influences not only threaten our national security, but put our institutions, faculty, staff, and students at risk. Higher education thrives in a global economy, a global community of thought, research, and collaboration, and compliance efforts are in place at the federal level and within UW system to ensure global perspectives without risking national security. Our institutions adhere to federal regulations of enrollment, employment, and reporting. We have a vested interest in protecting intellectual property and proprietary information developed at our institutions. To ensure the security of our institutions, in April of 2020, UW system began planning an internal audit of foreign influence throughout the UW system. The internal audit reviewed our institution's reporting and compliance to Section 117 of the Higher Education Act of 1965. Section 117 requires institutions to semi-annually disclose reports with the U.S. Department of Education when receiving a gift or entering into a contract with a foreign source of $250,000 or more. Our internal audit began prior to the department's updated guidance to states in June of 2020, which requires institutions to also report foreign sources of tuition, amounts passed through intermediaries, and intellectual property license fees. The audit report was completed in March of 2021 and UW system is actively instituting further compliance processes to enhance how our campuses adhere to federal standards of Section 117 and the updated guidance from June of 2020. The Office of Compliance and Integrity, formed under President Thompson's leadership, has been tasked to implement the audit's recommendation at the system level. OCI is expected to fully implement the recommendations by the summer of 22. Two of the most noteworthy audit recommendations have already been implemented. First, the audit noted that our shared financial systems did not contain a foreign identifier for foreign gifts or contracts. These items previously needed to be manually reviewed and processed. Starting in fiscal year 21, UW System has added an account code to SFS, the financial service system, to simply simplify tracking on campus and to aid in compliance. It's our goal to include these tracking components in the administrative transformation program, which is the complete overhaul of systems IT processes. Second, foreign influence reporting has been added to the compliance matrix that was developed by the Office of Compliance in 2020. The compliance matrix is a comprehensive database of nearly 500 university compliance obligations and includes Section 117. The matrix has been adapted to provide automatic reminders at 90, 60, and 30 days in advance of compliance deadlines to responsible employees. OCI is currently in the process of completing the remainder of the system level audit recommendations that include convening an internal work group to develop a system-wide policy on Section 117 reporting and develop improved systematic verification and evaluation procedures. Beyond our work on improving our federal reporting procedures, UW System took action in May 21 to close the Confucius Institute previously housed at the UW Platteville campus. UW System and Platteville were already in conversations and planning to end the program prior to congressional action. Upon passage of Section 1062 of the National Defense Authorization Act in 21, Department of Defense funds will be curtailed to institutions that host a Confucius Institute. I should add here that the only remaining relationship Platteville has is with a Chinese language program and what they call a Kung Fu program, where I believe it's teaching some martial arts. So those are the only relationship that exists now with Platteville and the university within China that they worked with on the Confucius Academy. Institute. Now, our internal audit and early closure of the Confucius Institute are only two examples of how the UW system has gone beyond meeting the requirements set by federal regulations. President Thompson has made it a top priority to modernize our IT systems to secure our digital information proactively and aggressively. We'll also work diligently to meet all federal requirements and vetting of students and faculty who work at our institutions. Included with my testimony is a memo from the Association of American Universities, outlining current actions taking place to enhance security at higher education institutions nationwide. UW System appreciates Senator Roth's bringing this concerns regarding foreign interference within our institutions of higher education to the forefront of conversation. However, System believes that any additional regulations to prevent foreign interference should be instituted at the federal level. UW System and our national partners are actively engaged with conversations on the topic. We're very pleased that Congressman Gallagher has been a leader on these conversations nationally, and President Thompson has had a number of productive conversations with the Congressman prior to his testimony to this committee in October. By adhering to federal regulations, UW System institutions already follow many of the measures included in the bills before you today. Yet establishing some of these policies at the state level could be duplicative and difficult to put into practice and could create additional administrative burdens, limiting our competitive advantage among the institutions for foreign investment that does not undermine our national security. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide you some examples of how we at UW System strive to curb foreign influence and our interest in continuing to strengthen these practices internally and at the federal level. Happy to take some questions.
Thank you. So I will, I'll start here just for a moment. And I hope, and this was sometimes you write out testimony you give and you just wonder how it's being received. So let me just first say that the intent here, there was a time, and only recently has this shift happened, where I believe that we felt that we could work genuinely with the Communist Party of China. We were encouraging the forging of these relationships, both at the business and academic level. Now we're recognizing that that's not the case. So it's almost a decoupling of some of those connections. So I am not suggesting, and I don't want anybody to think that, that I believe that the university system, is negligent intentionally. I just think that there's been a change and now we just need to catch up to the reality of the times. You mentioned in your testimony, you support, or you would, let's see it, you want this to be done at the federal level. I'm paraphrasing here because I forgot where I saw that. It should be instituted at the federal level. Does that insinuate that you're waiting then on action to be taken at the federal level, or if you were aware of or brought with other ways that you could enhance your security, that you would take that on now in lieu of action? The only reason I say that is it takes a while for those people to act up there.
I understand that completely, yeah. So to your first point, we are going to continue to have relationships with Chinese universities, and those are going to be very tricky to navigate, right? We've got this, we are all, higher education is very aware of this issue, and we're all trying to make sure that we're doing this responsibly. So there's a lot of different approaches to that. So I completely understand what you're coming in. Relatively recently have we decided to take this shift. And now how we implement that's really important. But to the point about the federal versus state, we're very open to increased security measures. We've taken steps ourselves. We'll do more if the ideas make sense. Our fear is the federal legislation seems to actually be moving, which is good. And we've very engaged in conversations with Gallagher and others on this. So if that's moving and then this move, if we do not end up aligned with the reporting, that's where the burden comes in. You know, so that's one thing right off that is if we have to file two different, we have this with sexual assault cases on our campuses right now where the federal and state reports do not align, and it's kind of a mess. So the second thing, and Tom can speak to this more too, but the idea of the vetting process for Chinese nationals and other international folks, the federal government has to maybe improve their process, because for us to try to duplicate a vetting process, well, they already have one that maybe needs to be enhanced, would be pretty expensive, and we're not sure how we do it, how we would actually do a thorough job of vetting the folks coming in from other countries, putting a question on a piece of paper, they're not going to answer that honestly anyway. So I think that if you really want to get at that vetting issue, which we understand and we agree with, then it probably would be better done at the federal level where they have the resources and the experience to it.
Would you want to add anything?
Yeah, in terms of the tools that we have, by the way, for context, I should just mention, I'm the export control officer at the UW-Madison campus. So one of my jobs is to put together the processes to address regulations as they come out. And so one of the issues is that the federal government just has more resources to vet these types of issues and to find out this kind of information. You know, the best we can do, this is going to sound a little lame, but the best we can do is we put a question like you had mentioned, and then maybe we would try to do some Google searches or, you know, something of that nature. We aren't going to find a database that says these are all the people in the Chinese military kind of thing. One of the other issues that I wanted to note in there was there's a little statement in that bill that says or affiliated with the Chinese military. And I will just mention with that can be interpreted a number of different ways by a number of people. And so if this bill would go through, I would like that term defined better, because, you know, let's just say it's an engineer that works at a company that supplies materials to the Chinese military, and now for some reason they want to come over to the US to a university.
Yeah.
Is that person affiliated to the military or not? What do we do with that person, kind of thing? So there's some things like that, but it just leads back to that question of the resources and the tools we have to try to figure out if these folks are connected to the PLA are very limited.
Just a comment to that, what I would say is I do plan as committee chair to kind of advance these bills. So what I would like to do is after this, we should conduct a meeting where we can kind of go through some of the, I know my staff's writing down notes of things that you're saying, things that we can kind of work to make sure that we address some of those concerns. Jeff, you cited in your 1-2-3 paragraph here, you talked about section 117 and your efforts to comply with that section. I guess my question is, prior to 2020, was the system complying with those reports?
I think, I can't speak. One of the reasons we did the audit was we wanted to ensure we were. I think, and in all honesty, it was mixed. I think some campuses didn't have an understanding of their reporting requirements. We fixed that now. That's why you do an audit, right? You want to make sure you identify those things. I think one of the concerns I have is if we have a piecemeal system where the state does something, the Fed does something, you're going to lead to more confusion. Because at our small campuses that may actually have some of this happen, I think Platteville, obviously, the example we used, they definitely don't have the resources to manage this. And if Madison's going to be confused about it, then the other 12 are definitely going to be confused about how best to report. So that's why we want to, number one, the audit identified where we had some process challenges, we fixed those. And number two, it's helped us understand the challenges that we're going to be facing moving forward in kind of making sure that we're, as these evolve, because they're evolving, federally, they're going to change. I really believe that's going to happen. We have to be better prepared to have a process that ensures not only that our campuses are doing it, but that we can identify when they're not. I mean, that's the other challenge. Like, if we have to have a process in place at the system level to say, hey, Milwaukee, you missed this, or hey, Lacrosse, you missed this, so that we can catch it early and don't have to wait for an audit to identify it. So I can't say for sure that we were completely compliant. I know now we've got a process in place to be compliant.
And I would say, same thing I mentioned before, that on that particular issue, I think it warrants a further conversation with our office, and just to kind of work through some of those complexities, because I think there are ways that we can address, you know, what might happen potentially if the federal government were to act on something.
Absolutely, we appreciate that. And your office has been fantastic to work with on this already, so we appreciate that.
I'm going to turn to the committee now. Senator Larson, did you have a question?
Not at this time, thank you.
Senator Stafschel, Senator Royce, Senator Pine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the process right now when a foreign national applies to come to a UW-Madison or UW-Platteville, for example? What is the process in reviewing that application to make sure they say who they are?
It really depends on under what circumstances they're coming here. Are they coming here as a student under an F1 visa? Are they coming here as a visiting scholar under a J1 visa? Or are they coming here as potentially it's like a semi-permanent employee under an H1B visa?
Okay.
The student piece, really, we've kind of we've looked at, we've discussed, but we haven't done anything on that aspect from an export control standpoint. So I'm just not a good person to discuss that with. From the other two standpoints, from the H1B standpoint, let's take that. These are usually people that are extremely talented people that are coming over from foreign countries. And back in 2011, the federal government put a requirement on the I-129 form, which is the application form that gets filled out, that basically asks a question of, is an export license required for this person to come over and to do the job that they're potentially being hired for. At that point, we developed a process with a form that goes through kind of all these export control type things.
And that's a federal form?
That's an internal, the I-129 form is a federal form, yes. The other form that I spoke of is an internal form. And it goes through things like the types of things they'll be working on. Will they be dealing with information that's not in the public domain? What countries are they from? Things like that. And then we get that in our office. By the way, my office is 2 people. Two. And then we look through that and look to see what they're coming over for, how the questions on the form were answered, and if it looks acceptable for them to come over, and whether we need a license for them to do the activities that they plan to do. One of the great benefits of UW-Madison is that we are essentially, very much so, a fundamental research campus. So almost all the work that we do on campus isn't export control, which leads to a very favorable response when we get these application forms and these certification forms in. And those are for any H-1Bs coming over from any country. Could be Canada, could be Germany, could be China or Russia. The J-1s are folks that are coming over for a shorter period of time, and they are they're basically, it's sort of more of a cultural exchange kind of process. And they're planning on going back home though. You know, they have an affiliation with the university or a company or some organization and they're coming over. In that case, we screen those people and their affiliations if they are from certain restricted, from restricted countries. China is one of those, Russia is another one of those. It's a list of about 25, 27 countries. And we actually screen them to see if they are restricted parties, if they are affiliated with restricted parties. And restricted parties are organizations that the federal government has placed on one of their bad actor lists, for lack of a better term. And if they come up okay, then we go back to International Faculty and Staff Services and say, yes, they can come over and that's fine. So those are kind of the processes. Do we specifically ask about military background in those? I know on our H-1B form, we don't, but it could very easily be added. You know, the J1s, whatever formage is with those is pretty much out of our hands. We basically just get emails saying, this is the person, this is where they're coming from, kind of thing. Good.
Thank you.
To surmise, I appreciate that we walking through that and the question from Senator Fine. If they're coming on an F1 visa, you're pretty much just taking the fact that they were granted it by the State Department, right? And that's about the end of the and then a little bit more for J1s and H1Bs.
Right,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Senator Pat, did you have a question?
I do, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you for this hearing. I'm looking at Senate Bill 745 in particular. And I guess my question to the University of Wisconsin is, how do you deal with contracts right now with companies that are foreign owned and doing research at a chemistry lab or at the University of Wisconsin meat lab and College of Agriculture, what it may be, a company that is currently foreign owned and may even be owned and domiciled in China. What is the current process for that?
There again, it's another one of these sort of distributed activity things that we have at UW-Madison. We have a number of organizations that deal with contracts from outside organizations. One of them is research and sponsored programs. That's where a lot of the contracts, like if somebody is getting an award to do research of some sort or another, that will go through research and sponsored programs. They will review the contents of the agreement. If they have questions about it, you know, can we do business with this organization or not? Then they will get a hold of our office and we will do some vetting and look through, you know, we get a lot of questions on clauses. Is this clause going to be an issue in this award? Can we do business with this organization? So that's one group. The international division has agreements with various universities to bring over students, you know, sometimes cultural exchange kind of things. We also know that CALS, the Agriculture and Life Sciences, the College of Agriculture, Life Sciences, also does agreements with organizations from other countries, and they will also get in touch with us if they have concerns about a particular agreement.
And Senator, this is Jeff. We also, as the bill summary says, but we do reporting on a number of research projects and funding and where that funding comes from to both the Board of Regents and to the legislature annually.
Thank you both for testifying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Darling? Jeff, Tom, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And we will stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
just to be clear, as someone who represents two UW campuses in their Sun district, I think maybe the only senator that does that in the state. I appreciated your mask.
I wish I could claim that I did it on purpose, but I got about 13 of them on my desk and I grabbed it on the way out the door. But tell Chancellor Frank when you see her that I was wearing them.
I will, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, that exhausts our speakers on Senate Bill 742, 744, and 745. That actually concludes our agenda here for today. So I will adjourn our committee. Thank you.